master was training his students. Everyone had to hold the horse stance for 2 hours. Mujin looked around and realized something was wrong, something anyone should have known. These poor bastards were going to wreck their knees and backs. The master was totally confident in his methods. But when Mujin shouted out that they were all ignorant damn worms who didn't know the basics, the master and the sect leaders were completely shocked. Even the students were stunned. The master pointed a finger at him and asked if Mujin had lost his brain along with his hair. The adults immediately accused him of making excuses because the training was too hard for him. Mujin didn't back down. He insisted the training was wrong. The master was furious. After all, the kid was claiming that the 1,000-year-old Shaolin training was flawed. Mujin then explained, training in that stance will destroy the knees faster than it builds leg muscle. Obviously, the master had no clue what he was talking about regarding knee cartilage. He accused him of making up excuses again, saying Mujin was just too weak for the training. The MC then questioned him. If martial arts are meant to train the body and mind, saying a weak person can't do it is a contradiction. The master was at a loss for words. So, Mujin continued, if the training method is to make young people suffer to train their minds to endure future hardships, then all the adults who suffered should have reached enlightenment, right? Mujin's questions planted seeds of doubt in the young baldies. But then, the MC pointed at the first-class disciple and asked why the old man hadn't reached enlightenment at his age yet. The man screamed in fury, and for the first time, Mujin felt he was in danger. The old man walked up to him and proposed a deal. If the disciple was so confident, he had to beat the other students without doing their training. He had to win a fight against the best student in the class. That strong, chubby kid would be his opponent. The kid stood up and accepted the fight. Mujin, on the other hand, knew this was unfair. The weight classes were completely different. The man wanted Mujin to back down and retreat, but that didn't happen. Our boy accepted the challenge to fight and win. The man struggled to hide his anger. The kid was more than just stubborn, and that was a problem. The old man turned around and ordered everyone to continue training. Mujin could do whatever training he wanted until the fight. A friend told Mujin he was very brave, but also must be crazy to make up that stuff about knees. The previous master ordered everyone back to training. The old man from before was also furious about being questioned like that in front of everyone. Just look at the students' reaction. It shook their confidence in the training methods. The fight would be in 7 days. Mujin started doing his own workout in front of everyone. Other older students tried to intimidate him for doing things differently, but the master was nearby and said he was allowed to do it. Our boy also took the chance to tell the students around him that their knees must be hurting like hell because of that stance. What none of them knew was that Mujin wasn't the same boy as before. In his past life, Mujin lived in the modern world and owned a gym. His job was to build muscle and motivate his students to grow their bodies naturally. Guys and girls got more aesthetic thanks to his work. This damn guy loved Murim manhwas, and for some reason, he fell asleep while reading one, or maybe he even died. What matters is that he reincarnated into the body of the young boy, Mujin. The 200-pound personal trainer was now a young, bald Shaolin monk. His memories of this body were the same as the protagonist of the book he had just read. On the very first day he saw how these baldies trained, he couldn't resist. He had to question everything. Now he's in a challenge to prove to the masters that there is a right way to do physical training. Meanwhile, the other students are shaking with pain and exhaustion. Mujin is capable of pushing his body much further without feeling pain. After training for 2 hours, Gangyuk becomes eager for a meal when Muyul calls him to eat. He then looks at the meal and wonders if that's all there is. At a long table, one of the masters invites everyone to eat, but Mujin remembers that temple food is vegetarian and asks, where's the protein? Realizing, he notices how vivid the smell of the food in that dream is. The smell is good, but he realizes it's only vegetables, and to him, it might as well be grass. Pounding on the table, Mujin declares, this is child abuse. He then asks, who dares disturb mealtime? Screaming, he says, we trained all morning. He asks, do you expect us to just eat this? Standing up, Mugung asks, what's the meaning of this? He states, that boy has only caused trouble since dawn. Approaching, he says, enough is enough. I'm going to teach you a lesson. But Mujin states, a body needs protein after training, and I will not tolerate this situation. Called by someone, Mujin and Mugung look to the side. Appearing, head chef Hyun Mun, the Shaolin Temple's head cook, says he was just passing by. Commenting, he says, that poor disciple must be very hungry. Offering, he proposes to give more rice, but Mujin replies, I already have enough. He then asks, does the young man want more side dishes? Because the child is clearly hungry. Questioning, Mujin asks, do you have protein supplements or better yet chicken breasts? Staring at him, the chef and the other monks observe, and one of them asks, What on earth is wrong with him? Approaching, Muyul says, he's been acting strange all morning, and asks, is everything all right? But Mujin just yells, I need my protein so I can build muscles for my body. He then wonders what is happening. The training feels hard, the food smells like food, and he questions, why haven't I woken up yet if this is a dream? Considering the possibility that it might be real, he decides he needs to be more careful. Remembering he is a disciple in a Shaolin temple, he understands he must be careful about what he says. Bowing, he apologizes, explaining, I was so hungry I didn't know what I was saying. Agreeing, the head chef states, you must be tired from training. Taking a guess, Mujin asks, can I eat some beans or mushrooms? Staring at him in silence, the chef doesn't respond. Dream or not, Mujin needed his protein anyway. The routine of training, breakfast, and studying Buddhist scriptures bored him and weighed heavily on him. Accepting that he is inside a novel, he wonders, how on earth will I get back home? Then the idea emerges that perhaps he can leave when the story ends. As the protagonist in a legendary martial arts school, he would certainly have a lot of talent. Accidentally spilling ink on his book, he creates a new problem. Noticing the situation, he realizes he is already surrounded by the other monks, and he realizes he has drawn too much attention to himself. Staring at him in silence, everyone in the room keeps their gaze fixed. But he decides that since he's there, there's nothing he can do about it now. Questioning the head chef, Master Hyejong asks, is it true? And he confirms, the boy is truly strange. Then Hyun Mun asks him, what will you do with Mujin? Explaining, Master Hyejong says, I gave him a week to defend his claims by challenging Mugung. Praising, Hyun Mun calls the solution wise as a way to escape criticism, but he questions the decision to make him face Mugung. Every year, the Shaolin Temple invites hundreds of children to compete, but many cannot endure the training and give up. Only a small percentage of those who start are officially accepted as true disciples. Therefore, it is rare for the first disciple or any senior monk to know a single child by name, and Mugung is one of those few selected. Stating, Hyejong says, Mugung is perfect for the task, and he will teach that boy a lesson. Announcing that, as promised, a week had passed, Master Hyejong marked the moment. He then asked if both were ready. Turning around, Muyul asked Mujin what he was doing. He replied that they were warm-up stretches. To sound like martial arts, he called the movement the four-limb extension technique. As part of any warm-up routine, stretching prepares muscles and relaxes ligaments. Many different positions and exercises exist, all aimed at increasing flexibility and range of motion. Inviting Muyul to try it with him, Mujin said, it's good to get into the habit. Observing, other monks wondered what they were doing and what was with those strange poses. Immediately catching on, Muyul followed along and Mujin praised him for being good at it. Suddenly, one of the monks pointed at Mugung's punches and asked if that was the chain fist. Mugung then threw a punch into the air. Commenting among themselves, the other monks said how amazing he was and that they could hear the air crackle with each blow. Realizing the situation, Mujin understood he was finished if any of those blows landed and wondered how he was supposed to defeat him in a week. Questioning himself, he thought about how on earth he was going to take him down. Suddenly, an idea struck him, and now he knew exactly what to do. Recalling the incident, Master Hyejong remembered that Mujin claimed he wasn't making excuses to avoid training. While he might not follow instructions, he seemed to have his own training methods. Explaining, Mujin said, I'm practicing how to take down Mugung in a single move, but he still wondered why the boy kept rubbing that tree. Confidently, he believed Mugung would handle that child's attitude problem. Noticing the gaze, Mugung saw that Master Hyejong was watching directly. Preparing himself, he stated that the boy would have to be his stepping stone. Stretching before his opponent, Mujin remained calm. He then stood up and stretched his back. Gesturing, he asked Master Hyejong if they could begin. Irritating both the master and Mugung, the boy's attitude hung heavily in the air. Taking a step forward, Mugung said, I'll show you. Facing his opponent, Mujin awaited the signal to begin. Revealing his confidence, Mugung showed how painstakingly he had perfected his chain fist. Then the master shouted, begin! And Mujin immediately charged forward. Surprised, Mugung reacted to the rapid advance. Realizing the danger, he understood it was a swift attack. Surprised, the other monks and the master noted the speed, seeing that he had dodged the chain fist. Grabbing Mugung, he acted, aware that he couldn't use real fighting techniques on a child. Having learned martial arts for real combat, he knew a slip-up could be fatal. So the best technique for the situation was something any child should be able to endure. Taking him down with a tackle, Mujin acted without hesitation. Hitting the ground hard, Mugung suffered the impact. Taking only a second, Mujin applied an arm lock. Shouting, the other monks didn't understand what was happening and told Mugung to hang on. Unable to believe what they were seeing, shock took over, and they wondered if brother Mugung could already be losing. Writhing on the ground, Mugung didn't understand what had happened. Desperately trying to guide him, some monks shouted for him to use his legs and roll, but they knew it was too late, for even without knowing what an arm lock was, years of training alerted them, and they recognized a painful position when they saw one. Warning him, Mujin said, "Your arm will break if you keep going. Just give up." Shouting, the other monks told him to get up, reminding him that his opponent had no training. Questioning him, Mujin asked, "Can you feel the bone about to pop? The damage could be permanent." Insisting, he asked Mugung to break free or simply give up. Continuing to shout, the monks repeated Mugung's name. Watching the scene, Mujin and the monks kept their gaze fixed. Immediately, he released him and apologized. Turning, one of the monks looked at Master Hyejong and asked what they should do about it. Approaching Mugung on the ground, Mujin said, "This is what happens when you force him to fight a child." Describing the chain fist technique, an ancient book records its fundamentals. As one of the forms of the 8 extremes fist, it focuses on fist, elbow, and shoulder strikes. Aiming to quickly overpower the opponent, it excels in close-range combat. And among the novice children, Mugong was the one who mastered this technique the most. Even the older generation of disciples marveled at his chain fist. But that morning, the remarkable technique was surpassed by the unknown method of a troublemaker. With little resistance, he was completely defeated. Sitting down, he complains that it was a cheap shot, and Mujin asks what he means. Accusing him, Mugung says he was attacked as soon as they started and that a strange technique was used. Screaming, he claims, "In a real fight, I would have won." Mujin comforts him. As they walk away, he corrects him, saying, "My name is Mugung, not Mugi." Other monks observe. Asserting, he says that Shaolin sparring must be done with Shaolin technique, a rule Mujin broke. Questioning, one of the monks asks why the chain fist wasn't used. Responding, Mujin says that if he had used it, they would have just traded blows and both would have been seriously injured. Asserting, he says that he won without hurting him. But the other monk insists that's not how it works, and that Shaolin techniques must be used. Not accepting this, they refuse to see the Shaolin chain fist defeated so easily by an untrained boy using unknown techniques. Admitting, one of them recognizes that Mugong lost and questions if they are being irrational, but he fears that if this continues, doubts will be cast upon Shaolin martial arts. In the worst-case scenario, they could lose all their disciples. Turning, they address Master Hyejong and ask what they should do. Then they see him smiling and wonder what he is thinking. Calling Mujin, Master Hyejong summons him, and he approaches. Questioning, he asks if it's true that that technique was used to subdue Mugong without injuring him, and Mujin confirms. Declaring, he says that this is within the Shaolin spirit and announces Mujin as the winner of today's challenge. Reacting, all the monks show surprise at the decision. Questioning himself, Mujin wonders why the master suddenly became so lenient. But Master Hyejong explains that his technique was so effective because the opponent only knows brute force. Affirming, he says he will demonstrate the essence of Shaolin martial arts. Preparing, he announces that he will show Shaolin's true power against evil. Dragging an enormous stone to the center of the courtyard, 2 monks make space. Questioning himself, Mujin wonders if he will break it with his bare hands, realizing it's a personal demonstration. Firming his feet on the ground, he tells everyone to observe carefully, as this is what they are training for. Then he places his hand on the rock to demonstrate the true power of the chain fist. With a shout, he delivers a powerful punch against the rock. Splintering, the rock breaks into several pieces. Commenting among themselves, they talk about the power of the chain fist and how they now understand why he is the first disciple. Smiling, Mujin exclaims, "This is what I call true Murim martial arts. Capable of piercing a mountain with a single explosion, Murim martial arts go beyond. They can also strike down hundreds of enemies with a single sword movement, and even make an opponent explode with a single punch." Interrupting, one of the monks asks Master Hyejong if the ultimate goal isn't defense. Turning, he confirms, "Yes, it is." Pointing to the ground, Mujin makes a simple gesture and questions if they should defend themselves with that intensity. Responding, the master says, "Perhaps not." Later that morning, things calm down. Questioning, Hyunsong, Master Hyejong's master, asks if the child, Mujin, overpowered Mugong in the blink of an eye. Confirming, Hyejong says he is correct, and his master concludes that he is not just a strange child. Explaining, he says that although he criticizes the morning training, Mujin practices the chain fist more than all other novices. Questioning again, he asks if he suspects the boy studies the technique to find ways to defeat it. Confirming, Hyejong says yes, and Hyunsong asks what he thinks. Suggesting, he raises the possibility that the boy is a spy from the sinister faction or the demonic cult. Surprised, the suspicion leaves him silent. Meanwhile, Mujin gets annoyed with the scriptures, and his master wonders if the child could really be a spy. Questioning himself, Master Hyejong wonders if the child could be a spy. But Hyunsong doubts it, as a real spy would never draw so much attention attention unless the goal was to interfere. He states that there is nothing to worry about, as the boy is still a novice disciple, and time will tell if he is a spy or just a strange child. Then a new possibility arises in his mind. Raising a hypothesis, he considers that the boy might actually be from a martial arts clan. After all, Mujin couldn't have created those mysterious techniques by himself, and perhaps he is just using his clan's techniques. Believing this, he thinks that out of admiration for his father, the boy would reject Shaolin's 1,000 years of teachings just to prove that his family's techniques are superior. And after defeating Mugung, he would be even more determined, which could complicate the situation. Suggesting a solution, Hyunsung proposes that perhaps they should ask for Beopgang's help. Surprised, Haejong questions if Beopgang isn't now a member of the discipline hall. Reassuring him, his master says that Beopgang still considers himself part of the Arhat Hall and that his involvement changes everything. Elsewhere, 3 young monks decide to end their training day and head back inside. Changing his mind, one of them tells them to go another way, leaving the others confused. Curious, they all peek out to see what's outside, wondering if he saw a ghost. Looking into the courtyard, they see a man training and wonder why he is there. Recognizing him, one of them says, "It's the Inquisitor, Brother Beopgang." He questions again why he is there. Wondering among themselves, the other monks don't understand why the man who always trained late into the night is doing the horse stance right there. Supposing a reason, one of the youngsters thinks he is there to pressure them to train harder. Commenting, another monk says that Beopgang has always been intense, and it's no wonder they call him the Inquisitor. Laughing, one of the youngsters says, "Beopgang, the wild attack dog of the discipline hall, has found the right place for himself." Correcting them, one of the monks reveals that Brother Beopgang will be back at the Arhat Hall with them starting tomorrow. Surprised, the others question the information, as they thought he would start at the discipline hall next term. It was general knowledge that Beopgang had a high rank and had set a stricter standard of discipline for the 3rd generation of disciples. Hearing that he visited each hall to better understand the laws before returning to the discipline hall, rumors spread. But Beopgang was rigorous and always led by example, never asking anyone to do something he wouldn't do himself. Since basic training, he trained more and longer than anyone, which overloaded his knees. Demanding all his inner strength, he overcame constant pain even when walking, and now they barely function. For him, training was a sacred journey, and pain was just part of the path. After finishing 30 minutes in the horse stance, he stands up and asks, "Where is the child, Mujin?" Imagining him, Beopgang visualizes the troublemaker and rising star of the Arhat Hall that Master Hyunsung spoke of. The next day, the young monks look ahead and one of them questions what he is seeing. Before all the novices stands Brother Beopgang, and questions arise about what he is doing there. Announcing, he says, "I have been transferred, and from this day forward, I will be with you again." This leaves one of the boys surprised. Laughing, Beopgang tells them to get used to the idea. Observing him, Mujin notices that he is the military type. While the other monks whisper among themselves, wondering why he is back, Mujin merely observes the scene. Spreading, confusion takes over the novices, who do not understand Beopgang's presence there. But amidst the chaos, Mujin quickly understands the situation. Concluding, he understands that the new instructor must have been the sergeant of his generation. Starting the morning training, the boy considers that it is not his problem. Immediately, Beopgang orders everyone to get into the horse stance. Walking among the disciples, he states that before disciplining someone, you must understand exactly what they are doing wrong. To attack with precision, it is necessary to understand them at a basic level. Then he begins the inspection to see how they are doing. Observing the posture of one of the monks, he notices his legs spread, back straight, and toes pointing forward. Demonstrating the same posture, Beopgang questions, "What are you doing, young one?" Thinking the movements look more like a dance, he notices inhalations and exhalations with each gesture, but he realizes that the pain is the same as the horse stance, concluding that it was just an excuse. Standing up, Mujin hears Beopgang say directly, "Your posture is wrong." Then Beopgang asks, "How is the posture wrong?" Realizing the situation, he understands that he needs to correct everything from top to bottom. Not understanding why he is being copied, Mujin hears the cartilage in his knees creak every time they are bent. Feeling the discomfort, he realizes that he cannot simply ignore the fact that the man's knees seem to be screaming for help. Concluding, he understands that if that man is the drill sergeant, having him by his side would be a great advantage. Smiling, Mujin hears Beopgang ask again, "What was wrong?" Explaining, the young man says, "With bad knees, that exercise is counterproductive. Can I show you something?" Afterwards, he demonstrates a stretching exercise on the ground. Praising, Mujin comments on his flexibility, while the other monks in the background wonder what is happening. Correcting himself, he calls the exercise the forelimb extension technique, explaining that the position allows the knee muscles to relax. Affirming, he says that warming up that way will make movement smoother during training and reduce the load on the knees. Beopgang agrees, feeling the difference. Then he instructs it should be 30 seconds for each set, totaling 3 sets. The movement should be repeated 3 times. Saying that was the first set and now they need to start over, Mujin notices Beopgang is on the ground. Approaching, he begins to massage the man's leg and asks, "Do you feel better?" Noticing the reaction, he observes that even light pressure causes pain, concluding that decades of excessive training had left his knees in that state. As the massage continues, Beopgang seems to notice a change. Reflecting, he realizes that at first it felt like an attack, but now the pain lessens and the sensation becomes almost pleasant. Informing him, Mujin says, "We've only done the exercise twice and we still need one more." But Beopgang questions, "Does this need to be done right now?" Pushing him from behind, the young man says, "Training waits for no one." Looking back, Beopgang wonders, who the hell is that kid? Observing from a distance, Master Hyejong and his disciples also watch, questioning what Beopgang is doing. Explaining, Mujin says this is how one should exercise when they have knee problems. Known as the Inquisitor, he was an orthodox fanatic due to his obsession with rules. Because of him, his fellow second-generation disciples never had a moment's rest, not even as novices, and were well aware of his fanatical devotion. So they didn't understand why Beopgang and the novice were together, doing the same strange movements. In the middle of training, Mujin suggests they take a break, then perform 15 more repetitions. Questioning, the boy asks why he lets his knees go into a full squat position, something he instructed him not to do because they aren't in good shape. Explaining, he says it's better to do only a slight bend to relieve pressure. So he decides to review everything Beopgang needs to do, and Beopgang agrees. First, he instructs him to bend his knees and lower his body slowly. Secondly, he explains that the movement should not be controlled with the knees, but with the hip and glute muscles. And thirdly, he guides him to use those same muscles to come back up. After the exercise, Mujin asks how he feels, and Beopgang replies that he's fine, so they decide to take a break. Noticing the change, he notes that he definitely felt less pain that time. Announcing, Mujin says that since they finished the 3 sets, they can now move on to the calves. Remembering, he recalls that tough military-type clients appeared all the time. He also remembers that the tougher they seemed, the easier it was to win them over with praise. Praising, Mujin says that he learns quickly, and Beopgang laughs, stating that he has been a Shaolin disciple for 18 years. Questioning themselves, the other monks wonder what happened to the wild dog, who now seems quite docile. Observing the scene, Master Hyejong feels his blood pressure rise and asks Buddha for help. With a headache, he decides to ignore them for now, as the bell announces the end of training and breakfast time. Advising, Mujin tells him to use what he learned whenever he trains his lower body, making sure to do so before any exercise. Agreeing, Beopgang accepts, completely won over by Mujin, but without forgetting why he is there. After trying physiotherapy, stretching, and massage, he reaches a conclusion. Concluding, he understands that those techniques are incredible. Feeling almost no knee pain, he notices in his muscles how effective the training was, recognizing that the techniques were undeniably efficient. So Beopgang asks if he learned all those techniques from his family. Considering them impressive, he assumes the boy comes from an important clan. Understanding what they are thinking, Mujin realizes they believe the techniques were passed down through generations. Noting this, he concludes that this story would cover all the strange attitudes so far. Smiling, the young man confirms that they are techniques learned from his family, and Beopgang laughs, praising them as truly impressive. Clarifying, Beopgang says he was only referring to the impressive healing techniques because in martial arts, nothing surpasses Shaolin's history. Meeting with Muyul, Mujin says he will keep Brother Beopgang's words in mind. Turning, he informs that he is finished and asks permission to withdraw, being released by Beopgang. Commenting, Mujin tells Muyul that he should have gone ahead, but his friend replies that he wanted to wait for him. Startled, Beopgang sees Master Hyejong standing right behind him. Immediately, he apologizes to the master for the appearance of the situation, and Hyejong acknowledges that he is aware of how it looked. Laughing, Beopgang explains that he wanted to personally experience the novice's training to know the enemy, and the master asks how it was. As the young men walk away, Beopgang begins to explain what he was able to perceive about that child, Mujin. Revealing, he says the boy is not from a martial arts clan but rather from a medical clan. Questioning, Hyejong asks what led him to this conclusion, and Beopgang prepares to explain. Starting, he says that his knees are almost ruined from years of training, and the master asks why he kept it a secret. Responding, he says he didn't want to worry the elders, and more importantly, he couldn't show weakness in front of the disciples. For decades, none of his his brothers noticed his knee problems, but that child noticed immediately and warned him that his knees would worsen if he continued. Concluding, Beopgang states that everything he practiced with Mujin was, in fact, techniques to lessen the load on his knees. Supposing, Hejong considers that he must be from a medical clan that treats Murim masters, but he soon dismisses the idea, lamenting that it's a disaster for a child to reject Shaolin training. Affirming, Beopgang says that children listen to adults they feel close to, and decides that, instead of forcing him, he will befriend him to bring him back to the Shaolin path. Agreeing, the master states there is no need to be impatient. Sighing, Mujin complains about having to study Buddhist scriptures right after breakfast, and Muyul comments that his face is purple. Announcing, the master says that since everyone has mastered the basics of the chain-link fist, they will move on to the next step. Explaining, he states that the true power of martial arts can only be achieved when inner and outer strength are in harmony, and that they will begin to develop inner strength. Then he calls 2 disciples forward for a demonstration. Instructing, he tells everyone to follow Beopgyung and Beopgong's example and enter the lotus position, but Mujin doesn't know what that means. But upon seeing one of the disciples position himself, he remembers the posture. Guiding them, the master tells them to close their eyes and focus on their breathing. Leading them, he asks them to inhale deeply through their nose, drawing the air inwards, and to continue breathing until they feel the air near the center of Qi. Excited, Mujin feels that he is finally learning the Murim martial arts he always fantasized about. Positioning himself, tired of the repetitive and incorrect training, he prepares for what he considers the true part. After rigorous basic training, the novices are filled with childlike excitement at finally learning Murim martial arts. Questioning themselves, they wonder if they will learn to break a rock like Master Hejong with the ancient Shaolin arts. Concentrated, everyone focuses on the master's voice, inhaling and exhaling as instructed. Realizing the situation, Mujin feels that something is also wrong with this training. Finding it strange, he thinks that even though it's just a breathing exercise, it wasn't how he remembered the training in novels. Questioning himself, he asks where the teachings about yin-yang, the 5 elements, and the I Ching are, but he supposes they must have their reasons. So, after complaining about all the training up to that point, he finally just does what he was told. The reason is simple. It's inner strength training, and his excitement is at its peak. With the transcendent power of inner strength, it would be possible to split mountains and even fly. After all, the inner strength techniques from Murim novels are taught in Shaolin, and he was finally going to learn them. Calling for attention, the master tells everyone to open their eyes. Explaining, he states that the inhalation and exhalation technique is a meditation to sense and gather qi, essential for using inner strength techniques. Advising, he instructs them to practice whenever they have time to feel the qi in their bodies. Realizing better, Mujin understands that they are not yet teaching inner strength techniques, only basic breathing. Understanding the process, he realizes he needs to feel the qi to cultivate inner strength, and then he sees a book being picked up. Distributing materials, veteran disciples hand out pamphlets with diagrams of the body's meridians, and one reaches Mujin. Informing them, Master Hejong says they don't need to memorize everything, but they must learn the main meridians to manipulate qi and subdue opponents. As the paths through which qi flows in the human body, meridians are essential for mastering martial arts. Calling someone forward, the master begins to teach the location of some meridians. Determined, Mujin flips through the booklet, deciding to memorize all the paths through which qi flows today. As the first step on the Shaolin Buddhist path of emptiness, learning the meridians and practicing the qi gathering technique becomes essential. Questioning himself, he wonders if merely memorizing the technique is enough. But upon seeing brother Beopgang training, he asks what he is doing. Laughing, Beopgang explains that the training methods have improved the pain in his knee, so now he's training even more. Covering his ears, Mujin says, "I can hear your cartilage." He states, "I taught you those things so your knees could heal." Retorting, Beopgang says, "The strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire." He shows off his 18 years of training muscles, but Mujin disagrees. Explaining, the boy says that if the fire gets too hot, the steel simply melts, and the same applies to their bodies. Then he apologizes and asks Beopgang to sit down. Informing him, Mujin says, "I'm going to manipulate your qi." He warns, "It's going to hurt a little." While pressing his knee, he asks the man to say if it hurts. Feeling those worn-out knees, the sensation reminds him of something. Recalling, he remembers his time in the Special Forces. With every step, there was constant effort. Despite the injuries, he continued training non-stop until he destroyed his own body. But all that hard work didn't allow him to remain in service. In the end, he was discharged. That was the lowest point of his life. He just watched the rain fall. Reflecting, Beopgang thinks that's how he must have looked back then. While massaging, Mujin advises him to take care of himself because if his body breaks down, no one will help him. Interrupting him, Beopgang makes the boy ask if he was being too preachy. Then he says, I have no idea what Mujin went through, but even if he were to break down, Shaolin wouldn't turn its back on him. Smiling, Beopgang states, we don't abandon any disciple, no matter what happens. Giving a slight smile, Mujin reacts in silence. Then Beopgang apologizes for taking his time and asks where he was going. The boy replies that he was going to practice the technique they learned. Questioning, the man asks, haven't you trained enough at home already? A doctor's son should understand the flow of qi. Fumbling with the question, Mujin says that some things came up and that he never learned about the flow of qi. Suggesting, Beopgang says, let's practice right now. Pointing at the boy, he says that perhaps by observing him, Mujin can find his qi faster. Sitting down, he admits he has no idea how to feel his own qi, but he believes he will learn something by observing closely. Positioning himself, the boy announces, I'm ready. Beopgang says, let's start concentrating. Kneeling, Beopgang asks him to observe and see what he can learn, hoping it helps. Then he begins to breathe deeply, and Mujin watches carefully. As the meditation continues, the boy notices that the air around them already feels different. This is Mujin's chance to see what is being done differently. Suddenly, he notices something he had never seen when training alone. Questioning himself, he asks if that's what everyone was talking about. Looking at Beopgang, Mujin asks, is that the qi? Sitting down, Mujin begins to practice breathing, trying to draw pure qi from nature. He directs everything to his energy center. Concentrating on the technique, posture, and visualization, he starts gathering qi, and finally he feels the flow of energy within himself. Opening his eyes, he realizes he managed to feel the qi, but something still puzzles him. Questioning himself, he asks why his qi is the size of a grain of rice. Even so, he rejoices at the small progress, winning the first mental battle. Noticing the change, Beopgang notes that the boy has already begun to feel qi, confirming that Master Hejong and the director were right. Continuing the practice, Mujin is already accustomed to the breathing, but he finds a cold sensation strange and opens one of his eyes. Regaining consciousness, he sees Beopgang standing in front of him and is startled to realize it's already nightfall. Apologizing for the late hour, he and Muyul explain themselves, but Beopgang says it's all right and urges them to return. Thanking him for the lesson, Mujin bids farewell, and Beopgang is impressed by the level of qi he already possesses. Commenting, Beopgang says it seems he can start the training for the path of emptiness, but Mujin questions if he doesn't need to memorize the meridians first. Reminding him, the man says that as a doctor's son, he should already know them, and the boy awkwardly agrees. Ending the jest, Beopgang hurries him inside as it's already late. Lamenting, Mujin complains about having pretended to be from a doctor's clan. The next day, the master asks those who have felt qi and memorized the meridians to step forward, and Mujin advances. Surprised, he realizes he wasn't the only one and wonders what's happening. Noticing the situation, he understands that feeling qi wasn't a big deal, as others also managed it. Announcing, the master says they are ready for the next level, leaving Mujin confused as he thought he was a genius. Presenting a book, he shows that it contains a summary of the Buddhist path of emptiness, one of the fundamentals of Shaolin teaching. Flipping through the book, he advises that, as they are beginners, he will be brief and start with basic concepts. Starting the explanation, he leaves the novices astonished. Impressed, the other disciples comment that they felt the qi and learned the meridians in just one day. Then Mujin's group returns from training. Questioning, Muyul asks how he managed to do all that in just one day, and the answer comes, it wasn't that difficult because it was the beginner level. Explaining, Mujin says that first, you need to learn to inhale qi into the body and circulate it, taking more care with the meridians as you progress. Asking Muyul questions if he didn't understand anything, and Mujin responds, advising. The boy says to focus on breathing first, as understanding will come soon. Dedicating himself, Mujin memorizes the meridians and their order until they are etched in his mind as the first step toward Shaolin mastery. Meditating, he feels the qi accumulating faster, even if they are just small improvements. Cheering up, he realizes that this is real inner strength training, like in the novels he used to read, and feels that he is progressing. Progressing smoothly, the training continues as he practices qi meditation, but he hears someone calling. Turning, he asks Muyul where he was. Then he sees his friend dragging another monk. Questioning, he asks, "Is that a corpse?" Correcting him, Muyul says, "It's Mugyong's body," and Mujin asks, "Is he dead?" Reassuring him, his friend says, "Mugyong, one of our older brothers, is alive." Explaining, he recounts that he tried to wake him up, but he was unconscious and too heavy to carry. Asking for a second, Mujin runs towards the fallen man. Crouching, he examines the monk sprawled on the ground. Looking closer, he realizes the marks on the body weren't made by being dragged. Becoming obvious, he understands what happened. Turning to Muyul, he states, "Someone beat the guy up." Pointing, he says, "The monk was kicked and is injured all over," and his friend agrees. But then he starts to wonder why that name sounds so familiar. Remembering, he recalls seeing a young monk who, unlike the others, always seemed thin and dejected. Until then, he had only noticed Mugyong in passing, but he was trying to remember something else. Sounding very familiar, the name didn't associate with a face. Deciding to set that aside for now, he asks, "Why did Mugyong get beaten up so badly?" Agreeing, Muyul says, "That's a good question." And Mujin questions, "Do you know why?" Responding, he says, "But we can find out. I already have a hunch about what happened." Smiling, Mujin says, "I know who we can ask." Explaining, he states, "Since the guy got here before us, we need to ask someone who was here before him." Referring to him, he speaks of that guy he fought, and Muyul understands whom he's referring to. Turning, Mugung asks, "What do you want?" Muyul doubts it, finding it unlikely that Mugung beat the rookie. He says it would even be a relief if that crybaby had the courage to do it. But Mujin reminds them that Mugung is the oldest rookie and would know how things were before they arrived. Walking through the courtyard, the two proceed while Muyul carries the unconscious boy on his shoulders. Suddenly appearing in front of them, Mugung asks what is happening. Losing his balance, Muyul ends up letting go of the young man, who falls hard onto the ground. Other monks watch in silence, and one of them asks if he just killed him. Questioning them, Mugung asks why the two are bothering him during his precious training time. Confronting him, Mujin criticizes his attitude and tells him to act like an older brother, showing some concern. Responding, Mugung says Mujin should act like a junior and show respect. But the boy reminds him, "I have already defeated you before." Defending himself, Mugung claims he was caught off guard, and Muyul agrees. Calling him a brat, Mugung lunges to throw a punch. Dodging with a quick movement, Mujin avoids the blow. Immobilizing him from behind with a twisting technique, he pins the opponent while Muyul laments that brother Mugung lost again. With his opponent pinned, Mujin states, "You will never defeat me. Do you know why?" Tightening his grip, Mujin proposes, "Let's begin." Mugung squirms. Then he offers a deal, promising to reveal the reason for his defeats if he tells him what happened to Mugyong. Releasing himself with a quick movement, Mugung escapes Mujin's grip. Brushing his shoulder, Mujin comments that it's obvious he's annoyed, still upset about the defeat. Continuing, he says that for someone as proud as Mugung, losing like that must be eating him alive. Stopping, Mugung turns, while Mujin demands that he first tell them what happened to Mugyong. Revealing, he says, Mugyong was beaten by Mutai and his gang, the only son of the Seo clan, protectors of Shaolin merchants. Showing a flashback image, Mugyong appears next to his father, a servant of that clan. Recruiting Mutai as a disciple, Master Heeman recognized Mugyong's talent and brought him along. But Mutai couldn't stand the idea of a servant's son being his equal and began bullying him. Furthermore, Mugyong's father still works for Mutai's father, making the situation even more complicated. Because of this, the boy cannot simply report Mutai to the superiors. Gritting his teeth, Mugung says, "Maybe I would understand if this were a normal school." But he points at Mujin and shouts, "This is Shaolin! Why aren't you doing anything, since you've been here longer?" Justifying himself, he asks what he could do, but Mujin retorts, "You are the strongest and should defend him." Arguing, Mugung says, "There are 3 opponents." But Mujin points out that Muyul considers him the strongest in the temple. Embarrassed, Mugung admits, maybe they think that because the others don't train hard. This leaves Mujin curious. Then he remembers that those guys are from clans of the Shaolin sect. Explaining, he says, the disciples from these clans already learn the basics of martial arts, which is why they don't push themselves as hard. Concluding, Mujin understands that this means they are more advanced than the other rookies. Suddenly, everyone turns as they realize Mugyong is waking up. Sitting on the ground, the boy asks confusedly, "Where am I?" Then he touches his own head, still disoriented. Upon seeing the 3 monks in front of him, he shrinks back in fear, and he begins to crawl backward, while Mujin says, "Don't worry." Raising his hands, Mujin says, "Mugung explained the situation. I understand that you are traumatized and afraid of everyone." Questioning himself, he thinks about how much bullying the boy suffered, and how this could happen in the Shaolin temple. Pondering, he understands that even if they went to Master Hyejong, Mugyong's father could face problems. But with a determined look, he affirms, "There must be something we can do." Approaching, Mujin tells Mugyong, "I have an idea to help you." Questioning him, the boy asks, "Do you really want to help?" Mujin affirms, the solution is simple. Explaining, he says, since the bullies use their father's position to threaten you, we will report them to Master Hyejong. Suspiciously, Mugyong asks, are you mocking me? He's concerned about what they would do to his father. Assuring him, Mujin says, I have already thought about this. All you need to do is become a true Shaolin disciple. Defining, he explains, a true disciple is one who officially commits to the main Shaolin order, and since most clan disciples come from outside, they cannot mess with an official order disciple. Understanding, Mugyong comprehends what Mujin is suggesting. Realizing it too, Mugung understands the ultimate goal of the plan, but Muyul remains confused, not understanding the proposal. Clarifying, Mujin explains, a clan disciple could never mess with a true disciple or his father, though he admits the plan might not work. Remembering Beopgang's words that Shaolin never turns its back on a disciple, he decides to see if it's true. Extending his hand to Mugyong, he states, not only Master Hyejong but all of Shaolin would not allow such injustice. In front of them, Mujin and the others await the boy's decision. Mujin encourages him, asking him to say something. He asks if he's afraid of not being able to become a true disciple. Hesitating, Mugyong only stutters while looking at the outstretched hand. Questioning again, Mujin asks how the boy treats him. He asks if he wants his father to continue working for a family like that. He continues, warning that if he does nothing, his father will end up working for Mutai. Then, he asks if he can live with that idea. Holding Mujin's hand firmly, Mugyong declares that he will do whatever it takes. Helping him up, Mujin says that it was a good decision. Turning to the others, he announces that it's time for the second part of the plan. Worried, Mugyong fears he won't be able to endure more beatings until he becomes a disciple, but Mujin states that there's no secret. 3 days later, during the afternoon break, some monks gather in the courtyard. Questioning, one of Mutai's companions asks if he's sure Mugyong will come today. Confirming, Mutai reveals that he threatened him, saying he would send a message to his house if he didn't show up. Commenting, his lackeys Muhui and Muhuan say that they were already itching for a fight. They say 2 days seems like a long time for someone used to daily beatings. Asking, one of them questions if they've seen Mugyong walking with strange people lately, like Mujin and Muyul. Confirming, the other adds that even the arrogant Mugung was with them, concluding that they'll have more targets for beating practice. Commenting with disdain, Mutai says that's lucky. He says he was wanting to give that boy Mujin a good beating. Agreeing, the companions say that he is always grumbling about something. They also say they never liked Mugung's face. Recalling the past, they remember when they saw him cry. One of them promises that he will make him cry again. Nearby, Mujin comments to Mugung that one of them doesn't like his face. He understands why they always stared at him. Walking forward, the group heads towards the bullies, and Mutai confronts them for not having fled. Mocking, one of the lackeys taunts Mujin. He says, you must be feeling good after beating that airhead. Provoking, Mujin nudges Mugung about the insult. Mugung responds by telling one of them to step forward to shut them up for good. Offering, Muyul says he'll fight one of them. Mugung states he'll take the last one, and Mujin will take Mutai. But turning, Mujin says that Mutai is all Mugyong's. Mugyong agrees with hesitation. Questioning him, he asks if he remembers what he taught him. He states that he will be fine, but Mugyong still doubts if he can really defeat him. Approaching slowly, Mutai comments that Mugyong has made some friends. He says he's very jealous. Staring at each other, the two groups face off with their gazes. Mutai calls him a crybaby, and Mujin promises to make him learn his place. Stopping right in front, Mutai asks what he intends to do. Then he questions if he's just going to stand there or if he's finally going to fight back. Trembling, Mugyong says, I can't do it. Mutai reminds him of what will happen if he attacks him. Threatening, he says, I know what will happen to your father. The memory of his father takes shape in his mind. Recalling Mujin's words, he remembers that there is only one way to free him, and that way is to teach them a lesson and become a true Shaolin disciple. With tears in his eyes, he says, don't you dare. Advancing, he shouts, don't you dare do anything to my father. Surprised, Muti reacts and retaliates with a blow. Meanwhile, Muyul blocks Muhui's punch. Muhui admits that he's not just an airhead. Clenching Muhuan's fist, Mugung surprises him with his strength. Noticing the difference, he notes that his opponent is not just stronger, but different. Something seems to have completely changed in Mugung. Recalling the past, he remembers when he refused to help. Mujin questioned him about his role as an older brother, asking if he was scared. Saying that since Mugung agreed to help, they could end the discussion, Mujin is interrupted by Mugung's denial. Demanding an answer, Mugung reminds him that the topic was why he always loses. Explaining, Mujin says that his chain fist is fast and strong, but that's all. Assuming a fighting stance, he challenges him to dodge the attack. Advancing with a punch, he sees Mugung manage to dodge, and congratulates him. Announcing the second form, he tells him to dodge once more. With a shout, he prepares to attack while Mugung concentrates to avoid the blow. But instead of a punch, he hits him with a low kick. Rolling on the ground, Mugung complains that he lied. Mujin explains that no opponent will simply let him attack. He then states that one needs to deceive the opponent. Acknowledging, Mujin admits that his attacks are indeed strong and fast, but he points out that his body position when striking makes his intentions obvious. Concluding, Mugung says that he just needs to attack with more strength and speed so that no one can dodge. Partially agreeing, Mujin says that wouldn't be wrong if he were the strongest man in the world, but he isn't. Using an example, he cites the main character from the novel The Fall of the Sinister Faction. Explaining, he says that the warrior of the Sinister Faction was the strongest, with a technique described as undefendable, even when expected. In other words, until he becomes the best in the world, this logic does not apply to him. Advising, he says that it's better to learn some tricks, like deceiving the opponent in a game of rock, paper, scissors. Returning to the fight, Mugung clenches Muhuan's fist and asks if that's all he can do. Then he announces that he will now strike him. He declares that he will use the first form of the chain fist, challenging him to try and dodge. In his memory, Mugung reflects on the need to use a little deception and wonders if he understands now. He had never considered it before, thinking it was cheating, but now he agrees that Mujin is right. So he offers to teach something in return, and Mujin asks what it would be. Warning, Mugung tells him not to think that Mutai and his friends will be as easy as he was. Confused, Mujin doesn't understand the statement. Revealing, Mugung says that he wasn't fighting with everything he had when they faced each other. Explaining, he states that in a real fight, opponents will use their clan styles and inner strength. Leading the others to a more secluded spot in the temple, he says that this place should do. Clarifying, he states that he didn't want any adults to see him using his clan style. Asking for caution, he requests that Muyul stand guard, as he believes he will surprise them. Requesting, Mujin asks him to show his style, and Mugung hopes this will finally earn him some respect. Concentrating, he begins to demonstrate his technique. With a shout, he unleashes his strength. Observing carefully, Mujin notices that the technique is different from when he only used the chain fist, with notable strength and speed. Realizing more deeply, he understands that the power isn't exactly what he expected, but it's still impressive for Mugung's age. Comprehending, he understands why he said it would be dangerous to underestimate them, as each strike makes the air crackle. Anticipating the confrontation, he recognizes that Mutai and his gang will fight seriously, using all their martial arts techniques. Abruptly stopping his movement before hitting Muyul, Mugung demonstrates control. Questioning, he asks about the power, and Mujin replies that it's incredible, confirming that he is the strongest child there. But he notes that Mugung still can't fully control his inner strength. Shifting his focus back to the fight, Mujin concludes that, in this case, the situation is manageable. Preparing, he takes a stance for the opponent's attack. Advancing, the lackey moves to attack, warning, here he goes. As he watches him approach, Mujin realizes that to use inner strength, they must adhere to predefined forms and styles. Comparing, he understands that compared to Mugung, the opponent's punch looks like a baby's. And as expected, he dodges the blow without difficulty. Understanding the situation, Mujin realizes that the style used will be the chain fist, making the movements obvious. Shocked, the lackey notices that the attack was dodged. Realizing this, he understands that Mujin didn't beat Mugung by luck and begins to retreat. Running towards him, Mujin begins a sequence of rapid blows, asking, "Is it my turn to attack now?" Raising his arms, the lackey protects his face. Noticing the guard, Mujin asks, "Are you just protecting your face?" Then he hits him with a punch to the stomach. Meanwhile, Muhui raises his arms to attack Muyul, but he dodges and trips the opponent. Reflecting the scene of the last fight, Mujin's eye follows everything, and Mugung prepares a powerful punch against Muhuan. Hitting the ground, the fist causes a large explosion. Fallen, Muhuan struggles to get up. Observing everything, Mutai is completely shocked by the scene. Then he starts to wonder if he is the villain now, seeing his fallen opponent act that way after intimidating Mugyong for so long. Turning around, he tries to see how the others are doing. Mugung and Muyul have already defeated their opponents and comment that they didn't even need to worry as the fight had barely begun. Hearing a strange noise, Mujin asks how Mugyong is doing since Mugung seems fine. Scared by the sound, he questions what that is, and then he sees Mugyong repeatedly beating Mutai on the ground. Running towards them, he shouts, "Stop! It's over! Seeing him like this, a sudden memory flashes in his mind. Realizing the reason, he understands why that name seemed familiar. The image of a boy smashing his opponent's face against the ground invades his thoughts, along with the savage gaze and blood smeared across his face. Then Mujin realizes there's no doubt, it really is him. Remembering, he recalls the worst character in the book, the villain with an insatiable bloodlust, and he realizes that this is Mugyeong, the blood monk. Remembering one of his favorite childhood novels, Mujin doesn't recall everything, but one illustration remained etched in his mind. The image showed a bloody monk screaming. He was screaming about the evil of humanity that only he could purify with blood, and the scene before his eyes now reminded him of that same horrifying Mugyeong from the novel. Questioning himself, he wondered what he had done. With the sole goal of boosting the boy's self-esteem, he ended up transforming him into that. Realizing the danger, he understood that if he didn't stop him, Mute could truly die. Running, he asked Muyul for help to intervene in the fight. Holding him together, the two restrained him while Mugyeong screamed, "Let go! Mutai will go after his father." Finally stopping, panting and with a bloody fist, everyone looked at Mute's unconscious body, and Mujin realized the situation could have been much worse. Kneeling on the ground, Mugyeong began to cry. Understanding the situation, Mujin realized that he was not yet the bloody monk. The character in the book was portrayed only as a madman, with no explanation ever given as to how he became that way. He must have suffered an absurd amount of bullying until one day he simply snapped. Suddenly, Beop Gang appeared in the hallway and asked what was happening there. Turning around, Mujin and Muyul realized they were doomed. Approaching, Beop Gang demanded that they explain themselves immediately. Pointing at the boys lying on the ground, he asked Mujin, "What the hell is going on?" Next, he turned to Mugyeong and questioned him too, but the boy merely hesitated. Mujin yelled, "Didn't you just tell us to explain ourselves?" Calling them by name, Beop Gang listed each of the 4 boys. Turning Mugyeong onto his back, Mujin made it so the Inquisitor could see him. Surprised by the action, Beop Gang asked, "What are you doing?" Asking for just a moment, Mujin told him, "Look at Mugyeong's body." Seeing the boy's back covered in bruises, Beop Gang wondered what that was. With a serious expression, he asked them, "Tell me what happened." Explaining, Mujin said that the bruises were the result of 2 months of beatings Mugyeong had endured. Continuing, he stated that on that day, they had called him to beat him again, which was why they intervened. Questioning, Beop Gang asked, "Is that true?" Turning, he asked the others, "Is that the truth?" Ordering, he told Muhui and Muhwan to stand up. Running to the scene, other monks arrived, asking what was happening upon hearing the screams. Trembling on the ground, the 2 boys couldn't respond. Observing the scene, one of the newcomers looked at Mute's unconscious body. Then he asked, "What the hell is going on here?" Turning to Mugyeong, Beopgang asked him to tell what happened in his own words. Hesitating, the boy began to tremble, not knowing what to say. Placing a hand on his shoulder, Mujin told him, "Just tell the truth." Encouraging him, he stated, "Brother Beopgang is a fair person," and told him, "Don't be afraid." Confirming, Mugyeong said that Mujin was right and began to recount that Mutai, Muhui, and Muhwan had been beating him for 2 months. With a trembling voice, he broke down in tears and explained everything he had been going through. Observing the scene, other monks watched as Mujin and Muyul awaited Beopgang's reaction. Even agitated, Mugyeong managed to convey the essence of the situation to the Inquisitor. Reminding him, Mujin recalled his words that Shaolin never turns its back on a disciple, feeling it was his responsibility to protect him. But Beopgang argued, those children are also Shaolin disciples. Questioning, the boy asked, "Can children who use threats to terrorize others be considered disciples? Does that represent the true spirit of Shaolin?" Agreeing, Beopgang said, "You are correct." Arriving at the scene, Hyunsong stated that they would investigate the case, but the accusation would only be valid if what they said was true. Declaring, the Arhat Hall director said that if the story was true, those children would no longer be accepted as disciples. Stating confidence, Mujin said, "I believe the investigation will be fair and open." But being interrupted, Hyunsong questioned, "Who would go so far against mere children, since the goal of martial arts is to subdue the opponent?" Pointing, he indicated Mutei's unconscious body on the ground. Kneeling, Mugyeong apologized, and then he raised his hand, taking the blame for what happened. Stepping forward, Mujin said, "It was all my fault. I let myself be carried away by anger over what they did to Mugyeong." Trying to stop him, Mugyeong said, "Mujin, don't take the blame for me." But stepping forward, Mujin stated, "All of this started because of me." Understanding the gravity, he realized that if he betrayed Mugyeong now, there was no telling when he might transform into the bloody monk, and that, instead, he could become everyone's best ally. Explaining, Beopgang says that is the place where they practice Buddhist meditation. He then informs Mujin that, for the next 7 days, he must remain there and not speak to anyone anyone as part of the ascetic practice. Announcing the arrival, he shows a cave and says the boy will complete his punishment inside. Guiding him, he explains that he must sit upright, face the wall, and meditate without turning outward, even to eat or sleep. Agreeing, Mujin enters the cave to begin meditating. He always believed that Gyeongga's works took place in the same world, but now a character from another story has appeared in his own. He already knew that the return of the demonic master and the fall of the sinister faction occurred in the same universe. The two protagonists were from the same period, but rarely met as they were in different regions. But in the second half of one of the books, the new monk from the new Shaolin emerges, making him realize that his actions could affect other stories. Questioning himself, he wonders if he caused a butterfly effect and if he is interfering with the development of other characters. To become stronger, he will need allies, but he only remembers some of them when they were still young. More than a decade has passed since he read the stories, and although he remembers the general overview, he doesn't recall the details. Reflecting, Mujin wonders if the story of the new Shaolin will still unfold if the main characters become friends and everything mixes together. Already involved with Mugyeong, the future blood monk, he understands that he needs to observe how things will unfold. It is by facing the blood monk that the protagonist of The Return of the Demonic Master achieves enlightenment and grows stronger. But if the blood monk is eliminated now, the other hero might never achieve enlightenment. The entire situation is too complex, and Mujin wonders where he should begin to fix it. Outside, Beopgang watches him in silence. Noticing the boy's concentration on his punishment, he sees that he does nothing else and finds it incredible that someone 12 years old has such focus. Considering his special techniques and already demonstrated talent, he believes the boy truly could be special. Shortly before, in another location, Headmaster Hyun-moon lets out a sigh. Lamenting, he says he failed to uphold his values, but Hyejong takes the blame for not controlling the situation. Changing the subject, Hyun-moon asks the disciple to tell him what he discovered. Reporting, Hyejong says that all the novices were questioned and that the testimonies were consistent, confirming that Mugyeong was regularly bullied. This could become a stain on the Shaolin Order's name, making the atmosphere around the Arhat Hall grim. Arriving next, Beopgang announces himself as a second-generation disciple and receives permission to enter. Questioning, Hyunsung asks Hyunmoon if he noticed the newcomer's hands, and the master cook confirms he saw them too. Just one look at Mugyeong's hands and face was enough to know that he was the one who did that to Mutai. Commenting, Hyunmoon says that this might be a blessing in disguise, something that could make up for everything, and that without Mujin, things could have been worse. Remaining silent, the three men stood like that for a moment. Asking to speak, Beopgang requests permission from the master to say something about the matter, and it is granted. Affirming, he says, the issue is not about who failed whom, as everyone is guilty. He suggests that instead of lamenting, they should ensure this does not happen again. Questioning, the headmaster asks if he has something in mind. Giving his humble opinion, Beopgang says, all of this happened because they need more training. Explaining, he states that the bullying was only possible because the children had too much energy, and to prevent this, training should be intensified until they are too tired. Requesting authorization, Beopgang asks for permission to proceed with his plan. Agreeing, Hyunmoon accepts and leaves the matter to him and Hyejong, as he will be busy resolving things in the coming days. Informing next, he says that the three guilty children will be punished, and that he will first pay a visit to the discipline hall. Returning to the cave, Beopgang promises the master that he will do his best with the children. Observing, he is impressed to see that Mujin hasn't moved for almost an hour and a half. Deciding to enter, Beopgang almost does, but he changes his mind and decides to just check on him the next morning, telling Mujin to continue meditating while he takes care of his water and rations. Remaining silent, the young monk stays inside the cave. Commenting to himself, Mujin says, the man is finally gone. Having spent 7 years in the special forces, he learned to sense people's presence in the mountains. Throwing himself to the ground, he wonders how he will spend 7 days there without any source of protein. Lying down, he asks himself how long it has been since he ate meat. Remembering, he thinks of the fried chicken he ate right before arriving, with its crispy batter and juicy meat. With his hunger growing, he can only think that he needs meat. Looking at the cave ceiling, he wonders where he could find some. Suddenly, he turns to the cave entrance and realizes that all he needs to do is hunt. Nearby, a girl runs through the forest while a white rabbit flees from her. Leaping, the animal heads towards a rope trap while the young girl watches hidden. Hidden in the vegetation, the girl observes the scene. Suddenly appearing, Mujin catches the rabbit in midair, announcing, I got protein. He then celebrates the meat he just secured. Hidden in the vegetation, the girl observes the scene in silence. Meanwhile, in Yichuan Prefecture, located a short distance from Shaolin Temple, temple, other events unfold. In the city, a group of Shaolin disciples works to gather information. Asking for help from local residents, they seek to understand the situation, and thus, they discover what had been happening in the area. Sometime later, they arrive at the gates of the SEO Merchant Protectors of Commerce and are invited inside. Leading the group, Hiegol, Shaolin's head of external affairs, walks in front. Introducing himself in a hurry, a man greets them and invites them in. Identifying himself, he says, "I am Munpyong Seo, head of the organization and Mutai's father." Declaring respect, he states, "It is an honor to meet the Grand Master of the Five Unmatched Fists." Behind the monks, Mutai cringes and trembles. Questioning harshly, Munpyong Seo asks why his son is in that condition and demands an explanation. Addressing Munpyong Seo, leader of the SAO Merchant Protectors, Hiegol takes the floor. He states that Mutai is in that condition because of his own wickedness, as he intimidated a colleague instead of cultivating his mind and body. Reacting with indignation, Munpyong Seo tries to respond, but the monk continues, saying that investigations have revealed even more, and they discovered that the Merchant Protectors are nothing but bandits who extort money from the community. Declaring disbelief, Hiegol says he cannot believe that a clan from the Shaolin sect is involved in such wickedness. He orders his disciples to close the place and remove those men's powers. Commanding in response, Munpyong Seo orders his subordinates to stop the monks immediately. Advancing, he attacks the man with a sequence of blows. He finishes with a direct punch to the opponent's chest. Rising above the fallen men, the monk observes that they are now without their powers. Demanding reparation, he orders them to return the wealth stolen from the people. Facing each other, the defeated men realize the situation is a disaster and they don't know what to do. Approaching a group of people, Hiegol asks if Gaeon Bang is present. Stepping forward, an older man identifies himself as Gaeon Bang and asks how he can help. Recognizing him, he exclaims, "You are from the temple." Apologizing humbly, Hiegol reveals that the child victimized by Mutai was his son, Mugyeong. Questioning with a heavy voice, the man asks, "Was my son suffering from bullying?" Stating firmly, he says, "No apology will make up for what happened." Far from there, in the forest, Mujin stops and reflects on something. Finding a poorly made trap on the ground, he wonders who built it. Noticing more closely, he sees that the trap looks like a poor version of the one he made the day before. Questioning himself, he wonders if someone is trying to copy him and if there is anyone else in those mountains. Suddenly, the young monk hears a sound coming from the bushes and turns around. Facing each other through the vegetation, the two stand still for an instant. Suddenly getting up, the girl runs away, but Mujin shouts, "I saw you!" Running desperately, she asks for him to wait. As she flees, she wonders if she managed to shake him off. Reaching out, Mujin finally catches her. Falling together, the two roll into the vegetation. Realizing the situation, he notices he has fallen on top of a girl. Apologizing, she says, "It wasn't my intention." Getting up, Mujin also apologizes. Later, the girl eats a piece of roasted meat, and he comments that she must have been hungry, since she was also trying to catch the rabbit to eat. Sitting by the fire, she asks, "Can monks eat meat?" Responding vaguely, Mujin says, "It depends. Don't worry about it." Then he asks how she ended up in the mountains, since those are Shaolin temple lands. Looking down, she remains silent. A memory shows her begging her father not to leave her. In another memory, she questions, "Why does everyone hate me? Is it my fault for existing?" Realizing the sensitivity of the subject, Mujin decides to change the topic. Asking for a favor, he requests that she keep it a secret that he went out hunting and ate rabbits. Questioning, the girl asks, "Is it because monks shouldn't eat meat?" But he just says he has his reasons. In return, he offers to help her get back home, leaving her surprised. Explaining, he says that a shirtless monk, but with some influence, will pass by soon and she can ask him for help. Asking, the girl wants to know, "How do you know the man is coming?" Mujin replies, "I can simply feel it." Guiding her, he says that all she needs to do is wait in front of the cave while Beopgang approaches. Approaching the man, the girl asks for help. He is startled to see her and asks, "What is an outsider doing here?" She explains that she got separated from her group. Agreeing, Beopgang says, "I will help you get back home." Suddenly, the man stares at her with a serious expression. Pointing to the cave, he asks, "Did you happen to see a little boy around here?" Inside the cave, Mujin feels a shiver. Understanding the request for secrecy, the girl replies, "I'm afraid to approach the cave and I haven't seen anything go in or out." Concluding, Beopgang decides that Mujin must be meditating and resolves to return that day. Inviting her, he asks her to accompany him as they can go down the mountain together to take her home, and she thanks him. Asking as they walk, he wants to know her name. The girl replies, "My name is Seolhwa Ryu." Inside the cave, Mujin's ear twitches with attention. Confirming, the young monk realizes that the man is finally gone. Lying on the ground, he comments, "I'm tired. I forgot the little girl's name." Concluding, he decides that, in the end, her name doesn't matter. matter. Elsewhere, Mugyong greets Beopgang and asks if he needed anything. Responding, the man says, "I need to tell you something that involves your father." Beopgang told Mugyong that the CO Trade Merchant Protectors, managed by his tormentor's father, had been shut down. He also informed him that the Shaolin had found another position for his father elsewhere. He then advised the boy not to worry about the outside world anymore and to strive to become a true disciple. With determination, Mugyong stared at the older man. Then the young monk promised he would do his best, and he swore to do whatever it took to become a true disciple. On the fourth day, Mujin's Special Forces survival training helped him hunt for food. He recalled cooking for the young girl over a campfire, a carelessness that could have easily exposed him. After that day, he began doing everything in another nearby cave to leave no traces. He always made sure to clean everything after he finished. To avoid leaving any traces, he would roast animals wrapped in a covered clay pit before eating them. That was his first meat meal since arriving at the temple, and it provided him with plenty of protein. Mujin wakes before the morning bell and assumes the lotus position to meditate facing the wall. But he did this because he felt a presence approaching the cave. Beopgang arrives at the cave and is impressed to see Mujin already awake and meditating. He enters, wondering if the boy stayed awake all night to repent. He then places a bamboo container and a pouch of rations on the ground, and he marvels that Mujin didn't break his meditation even with his presence. Beopgang leaves the water and food on the ground beside him. Only when the man walks away does Mujin look to confirm he is alone. He picks up the rations, thinking they are going too far by expecting children to live on that for a week. All they give him is water and meditation rations once a day. But he gets the rest of the nutrients he needs by hunting, and he has already gotten used to the routine. The sixth day dawns in the forest, and inside the cave, he does what exercises he can to warm up, as the rule is to use protein and energy immediately. As he continued moving, he noticed something important. During the exercise, his breathing resembled the inhale and exhale technique. To test it, he began combining void training with gymnastics techniques to create his own method. Mujin could feel the results of the training in his body, but he would only realize something more later. In fact, what he was doing was a form of fluid cultivation training. On the seventh day, Beopgang announces that the meditation training is over and that he can now stand up. Mujin asks if this means he can speak again, and the man confirms that he can. He then warns that morning training will begin shortly and instructs him to return to the training grounds. As they walk, Mujin asks how the situation with Mugyong was resolved. Beopgang explains that they investigated Mutai's clan and uncovered the corruption of the CO Trade Merchant Protectors. As a result, the clan was disbanded, their martial arts abilities were denied, and Mugyong's father was given a new position elsewhere. He also informs him that the training level was intensified during the last week, and that, in fairness to the other children, Mujin must now follow the Shaolin training methods. He then suggests increasing his own training level, but continuing to train in his own way. Beopgang merely replies, "We shall see," as they arrive at the Arhat Hall training ground. Upon entering, Muyul runs toward him to greet him. Mujin asks how everyone has been doing, and Muyul replies, "It has been very difficult." Mugyong comments that he almost gave up, but Mugung boasts, saying, "It was a piece of cake for me." Then the young monk turns to his friends. Master Hyejong announces that morning training begins now and orders everyone to form a line. A disciple throws a bag on the ground, and Mujin wonders what those things are. The boys recognize the sandbags and begin tying them to their bodies. The master orders them to pick up the bags and return to their positions, making Mujin wonder if this was how they made the training harder. Aside from Mujin's return, this was the same morning training as always. With the traditional training even harder, the children were drenched in sweat. So Mujin used the sandbags as dumbbells to continue his personal training. The sandbags are unbalanced and the grip isn't the best, but he doesn't intend to be a bodybuilder, so it was perfect for him. Two disciples observe that Mujin is acting as if nothing has changed, doing everything his own way. Beopgang walks towards Mujin, and the other boys believe he will finally put him in his place. Approaching, Beopgang reminds the boy that the training has become harder. He notices that Mujin is pushing himself much harder than everyone else. Then he feels a heavy energy emanating from the young monk, and Beopgang recognizes it as fluid cultivation. Fluid cultivation only becomes possible when one gets used to gathering qi, a method of accumulating energy in motion. Techniques that use qi gathered with this method allow one to escape normal physical limits to perform superhuman feats, such as destroying a rock. It also becomes possible to fly through the skies, move at high speed, and utilize many other techniques. Something catches their attention. Mujin comments that he was already tired of bodyweight exercises and that it was good they provided the weights. He then starts doing triceps extensions with the sandbags. While all the other disciples struggled with the training, Mujin was the only one using the sandbags for modern weightlifting, feeling his muscles respond. The boy felt satisfied with the result. Alarmed by the strange scene, the other boy boys stare at him and wonder what is wrong with him. But Beopgang saw something more in Mujin. He carefully observes the scene. The man realizes that it is fluid cultivation and wonders when the boy learned the technique. So Beopgang approaches and asks for a moment of his attention. He sits down and asks Mujin to follow him for a moment. Master Hejong confirms that Beopgang was right. He recognizes the technique as fluid cultivation and wonders how long Mujin has been able to use it. The boy remembers learning it during his time in the cave, but knows he cannot admit he disobeyed his punishment. So he decides to lie and states that it was the first time he tried. He invents a story about his clan's breathing techniques and the excitement of exercising again. He explains that he simply combined his clan's method with the inhale and exhale technique, and that was the result. The explanation leaves the two men completely surprised. Hyejong reflects that fluid cultivation is usually only possible after advancements in void training. Beopgang adds that, although void training can be mastered in a few years, few disciples have managed to perform fluid cultivation. That is why, after a solid foundation in the path of the void, disciples learn the next technique in mental training. Instead of dedicating 12 hours a day trying to learn fluid cultivation, they could spend a fraction of that time learning multiple other mental techniques to control qi. But if someone learned the path of the void and fluid cultivation in a matter of days like Mujin, they would gather inner qi at an extraordinary pace. Then Hyejong wonders how quickly the boy will master more advanced mental techniques if he learned fluid cultivation so easily. The master composes himself and prepares to ask Mujin a question. Hyejong asks, "Does that mean you can use fluid cultivation whenever you want?" Mujin replies, "I can only do it when I use my clan's training techniques." Then the young monk asks if he can go back to training, and Hyejong allows it. He runs back to the training courtyard. The masters comment that they got excited for nothing. Mujin turns to Mugyong and asks if they should continue. He then approaches and asks the others if they are practicing the four-limb extension technique, and Muyul confirms that they are. Muyul explains that the other two seemed interested, so he taught them. Mugyong comments that Muyul is a good teacher and that he feels better after practicing, although it still hurts. Mujin remembers teaching Muyul how to stretch and is surprised by how quickly he learned. He had not paid much attention to Muyul as he is not mentioned in Gyeongga's books, but he realizes that his technique is peculiar. The technique is skilled yet simple, and he wonders if that's why he never became a master, as he probably doesn't even know the meridians. Mujin turns to Mugyong, deciding he will find that out later. He then turns to the boy and asks about him. Mujin asks if Muyul has been teaching him and says he wants to see what he has learned. Mugyong struggles to count the exercise movements while being encouraged. They follow the military calisthenics routine, and one of them asks, "Is it normal to feel so much pain on the side of my body?" Mujin corrects the other's posture, telling Mugyong not to clench his fists and Mugyong to stretch his arm. He then announces that the next exercise will be breathing. The boys line up and follow the count for the breathing exercise. Mugyong comments, "This one is easy, and everyone is doing well." He then observes Muyul, reflecting on the time the boy spent with Mujin. He demonstrates impressive flexibility, surprising the other monks with his skill. Mujin reflects on Muyul, the boy who took him out of the running to become a true disciple. He observes Muyul, skilled but simple-minded. He then remembers Mugyong, who beat up Mutai. Mugyong concludes that, although everyone might be impressive, he will strive to keep up with them. With ease, Mujin lifts the new sandbags during his morning training. In his free time, he has been practicing cultivating his inner energy. He also leads other monks in stretching exercises, requiring them to keep their backs straight. Two monks comment among themselves, with one asking if the other noticed something about Mujin. One questions if the boy's shoulders don't look wider, but his companion can't tell. They wonder if this is a result of the strange exercises he does, and then the 10th day arrives. Master Hejong announces to the novices that it's time to move on to inner energy training. He then calls a disciple to step forward and demonstrate the exercise. He begins to explain the first form, detailing how the inner force must be drawn from the chi center. He then instructs that the energy must be divided and sent towards the shoulders and collarbone. Concentrating, Mujin gathers the energy in his chi center and then raises it. He remembers the instruction to divide it in a 7:3 ratio. The boy assumes the final stance of the chain link fist technique, and with a quick movement, he performs the first form. Mujin questions the sensation in his hand, feeling the inner strength fortify every part of his body. He understands that the reason for not sending all the energy to one side is to maintain balance. Then he realizes it makes sense to distribute the energy to other parts of the body. Master Hejong explains that to use the technique correctly, One must also distribute qi to the lower body, and Mujin confirms he was right. But if that's the case, a new idea emerges in his mind. The energy should not only be divided into the arms, but also the legs, which requires full body control. Observing his own arm, the technique proves to be much more complicated than it seemed. He then questions how much training would be needed to use all of this in real combat. For now, he observes the other monks trying to practice. Muyul moves clumsily and asks if he's doing it the right way. Mujin approaches and asks his friend to wait a moment. He asks what Muyul is doing, and the boy replies that he couldn't remember the order. The young monk describes the wrong order of the meridians, but is corrected about the proper sequence. He makes a mistake again about the direction of the energy, and Mujin corrects him, reminding him that he is right-handed. Finally, Muyul remembers what was said, while Mujin observes him in silence. He tells the boy not to worry about the names of the meridians, and just to bring the inner force to a point in his belly. After that, Mujin instructs him to move the energy to another point, and then to his shoulder. Muyul manages to perform the movement, and celebrates that it's much easier that way. Mujin advises him to ask if he gets confused again, as he feels he might forget. Immediately, the young monk moves clumsily, and already asks where the energy should go. Then Mujin realizes his friend has the memory of a goldfish. Master Hyejong and the second-generation disciples taught a different fundamental form each day. After that, they continued working with each child according to their individual needs. And this training continued for 70 days until the present moment. One by one, all the young monks, including Mujin, mastered the 10 fundamental forms of the chain-link fist. Mugung warns one of the boys, who is doing push-ups, that 20 seconds have already passed. The boy gets up from the floor. Mujin turns and asks if they should do some squats. During the morning training, Beopgang watches everyone putting in effort. Suddenly, he questions who is breathing so loudly. His gaze turns to a small group of monks doing squats with sandbags. He is then surprised to see the number of sandbags Mujin is lifting. The boy's strength and muscles are remarkable for his age. His physical capability is far beyond that of the other novices. Beopgang reflects that the boy achieved all of this in just 2 months, questioning if he had been right all along. He remembers when Mujin advised him about the exercises and his own training. Sitting alone, he questions if the Shaolin training methods are wrong. Master Hyunsung approaches and asks why he is still there as the training is over. Standing up to greet him, Beopgang notices that something seems to be bothering him. Then, Hyunsung advises him to share his burdens, so they become lighter. He asks again what is bothering him so much, and Beopgang replies that his concern has to do with Mujin and says he doesn't understand him. Beopgang informs Mujin that Master Hyunsung would like to speak with him. Other monks react, with one asking what the boy did this time and telling him to apologize. Then Beopgang hurries him, saying the master is waiting, and Mujin follows him. Already inside a room, Mujin wonders if he did something he wasn't aware of. He then questions what Hyunsung, the master of Arhat Hall, could want with him. Hyunsung reflects on Mujin's drastic improvement in such a short time. He could feel the boy's temperament and potential, but Beopgang's concern left him intrigued. Then the master orders Beopgang to summon Mujin. Hyunsung explains that this is not something that can be resolved just between the two of them. It would be better to meet Mujin personally and discuss the matter directly with him. Mujin presents himself before the master, who is sitting at the table. Looking at the man, he questions what is happening. Mujin wonders why he was called only to be stared at in silence when he should be training. He feels that it's not just the way the master looks at him, but that he is being measured from head to toe. The boy feels that every aspect of him is being judged. Then he flexes his muscles and states, "I am not yet in my best shape for a competition." Hyunsung asks what he is doing, and Mujin replies, "I was just posing a bit." The master comments that it has been a while since they talked, and the boy agrees that they haven't spoken since the incident. Mujin remembers the fight and asks if the summons has anything to do with it. But Hyunsung takes a sip of tea and says, "No, I just needed to see for myself." Hyunsung states that now that he has seen, he is certain of something, and Mujin asks what he is certain of. The master comments that he has developed much faster than the other rookies and that the rumors about his strength were true. But he reveals that this is not the only reason he called him, asking if his remarkable development is due to his clan's training methods. The boy predicts that this will only lead to problems and that they will ask him to train the Shaolin way. Mujin asks if the master wanted to see if his training methods are really better than the Shaolin way, but he denies it. Then Hyunsung explains that Shaolin is not such an inflexible place, and he would like to suggest something. The young monk remembers Master Hyejong yelling about training, so he asks what he had in mind. The master explains that the reason Shaolin survived for 1,000 years was by adapting, but Mujin says, I don't understand. Then Hyunsung proposes that if the boy can prove the worth of his clan's methods, they can incorporate them into their own. He refers to those peculiar training methods, leaving Moojin surprised. The boy wonders what this means and if they will truly accept his training methods. As master of the Arhat Hall, Hyunsung was a monk in pursuit of enlightenment, willing to make difficult decisions for the development of Shaolin. Introducing Moojin's training methods was a risk, and it would be better to test them first with the young disciples of the Arhat Hall. If something went wrong, he would be punished. But he decided it was worth the risk to continue developing Shaolin's rich history. After all, if the training method was truly effective, it could very well strengthen the temple's foundation. Moojin refuses and asks, "Why should it be me?" Master Hyunsung stares at him sternly. Then he shouts back asking, "Who else could it be?" The boy argues that there are over 70 rookies and he has his own training to do. Furthermore, he comments that the other disciples treat him like a freak and wouldn't accept his instructions. In fact, it would be good if he trained the rookie disciples, as he is now part of Shaolin, but he didn't want to have to use those brats. Moojin then says that if they really want to test his methods, he has some conditions. Later, the young monks sleep soundly in their rooms, and suddenly the boys are woken with a shout, "Get up!" They rush out of the room, and one of them asks if it's already time for morning training, as the bell hasn't rung yet. A voice orders them to run to the training grounds, saying, "You didn't come to Shaolin to sleep." The monks stand outside, not understanding what is happening. Then they see Moojin standing in the courtyard with Master Haejong and Beopgang. The master explains that the reason for waking them earlier is because they have added some warm-up exercises to morning training. Furthermore, Master Haejong announces that the morning training sessions will now be led by Moojin. As expected, the other rookies do not react well to the news, as they are the same age and he is not popular among them. But now that he is in charge, the boy knows he cannot show weakness. Then he shouts for attention, activating his instructor mode. Moojin announces, "From today, morning training will follow my clan's methods." He declares, "During this time, I am no longer one of you, and everyone must refer to me as instructor." Observing from afar, Master Hyejong comments, "The little rascal never ceases to surprise." Beopgang notices the determined look in the boy's eyes. Mutai scoffs at the situation, while another monk smiles behind him. The group mocks the idea, questioning, "Why should we listen to him?" Moojin asks, "Are you laughing?" He challenges everyone to see if they will still be laughing at the end of that morning's training, making the others step back. The young instructor calls everyone who has a problem with him and who was laughing to step forward. When the group advances, Moojin challenges them, promising, "If I falter for a moment, I will resign from my position and join you as another disciple." Moojin positions himself in the center of the courtyard, surrounded by the monks, and asks, "Is that everyone?" Then he declares that he will face them all at once and prepares for the fight. At his command, the boys rush towards him. The group simultaneously attacks him with a flurry of punches. They suddenly stop, and one of the monks asks, "Where did he go?" Moojin reappears crouching among them and questions, "Is that all you've got?" With a swift movement, he positions himself behind one of the attackers. Then he grabs him in an arm lock while the others shout, "Do something!" Moojin prepares the chain-link fist and attacks the two monks in front of him. Then all the attackers fall defeated to the ground. He looks at the rest of the group and asks, "Does anyone want more?" The other disciples remain silent, and Moojin states, "I was serious." Pointing at them, he declares, "From this moment on, I am in charge of the training, and everyone must call me instructor." He starts the count for push-ups, warning that if anyone's stomach touches the ground, they will receive double the sandbags. The young monks do the exercise, and Moojin instructs that on 2, they must extend their arms and stand up. Observing the scene, Beopgang reflects on how skilled that little rascal is. He concludes that Moojin must have had teaching experience at home, and the training proceeds smoothly. But he didn't supervise all 70 disciples alone, turning Mugyeong, Mugung, and Muyul into assistant instructors. The new assistants help correct the posture of the others, allowing Moojin to better supervise and train everyone. He believes that teaching other children of the same age will help Mugyeong with his self-esteem. Beopgang, almost more a soldier than a monk, found the ideal training method thanks to Moojin. He reflects on how those children were playing a short while ago and now train with seriousness. Beopgang advises Moojin to take it easy at first and be tough if they cross the line, while the boy shouts, "Did everyone learn their lesson?" And even though they were novices, the results came quickly, with their strength and muscle tone visibly improving. Moojin approaches the adult monks and asks, "Did you manage to do what I asked?" Over time, they saw the clear effects of the training and came to trust the boy completely, confirming that everything had been provided. Then he celebrates, as the equipment has finally arrived. It was what he had asked the master for in exchange for teaching the children, a complete weightlifting set with a bench, bar, and plates. The boy notes that, with the exception of the bar, everything is made of wood, but he believes it should work since he can use sandbags as dumbbells. Even with the 3 little helpers, there were limits to teaching over 70 children, and this was starting to affect his personal training. So all that equipment was made at his personal request. Mujin gets excited at the idea of being able to do the 3 big lifts in Shaolin and guarantees that this will make the children stronger. Through constant training, he reached a new level. In fact, several new levels. The bar and plates weighed almost 90 kilograms, and at just 13 years old, Mujin was already growing fast. Then he starts doing a set of squats with the bar on his back. Mujin flexes his arm, calculating that his total in the 3 big lifts should be 230 kilograms. He flexes his muscles, believing he could probably reach 300 kilograms for a 1-rep max. And that's how things happened. The seasons changed from autumn to snow, and from snow to the explosion of green in spring. 20 of the novices left Shaolin Temple. Those were the ones who couldn't master martial arts within the year. Master Hyejong informs Hyunsung that almost 50 children remained, almost triple the last time. Hyunsung laughs and says, "It's all thanks to Mujin." The master becomes one of his biggest supporters and asks, "Can we get more equipment for the Arhat Hall?" Having seen the clear benefits of Mujin's training methods, he wanted to obtain as much equipment as possible. But no matter how big the Shaolin Temple was, there was a limit to what was possible within the budget. So Hyunsung reflects that after 50 years seeking enlightenment, the admission test can't come soon enough. That was the last test the novices faced to be selected as disciples. If the test proved the effectiveness of the training methods, the Arhat Hall could get all the equipment they dreamed of. That year, Mujin hit puberty, grew over 10 centimeters, and his total in the 3 big lifts was 400 kilograms for 12 repetitions. Reaching only 400 kilograms after a year and 9 months might seem slow to some, but Mujin was not a bodybuilder. He was a martial artist. Too large muscles can become an impediment to martial arts movements, so he only gained just enough bulk. His physique was comparable to that of a TV celebrity famous for being in shape. Mujin was no longer built like trainer Gang Hyuk Choi. Now he was defined like a martial artist with every muscle clearly visible. At the peak of the boy's training, Hyunsung ventures out of the Arhat Hall. He introduces himself to the monk abbot, informing him about the admission test in 5 days, and is invited inside. The abbot says, "I have already received the news that you brought most of the children for the admission test." Hyunsung attributes the success to the profound virtue of the monk abbot. The abbot comments, "You must be feeling quite confident." And Hyunsung confirms, "I have reasons for it." Then he bows and states, "I humbly believe this admission test will be very different from the others." That was Hyanshin, the abbot of Shaolin. High-ranking members from all the halls gather at the Arhat Hall for the admission test. Thanks to Mujin, 49 children arrive for the test, with 42 remaining after some leave. Everyone was gathered to see that incredible result for themselves, and Hyunsung agrees with another master, saying, "It wouldn't be good to keep that just for ourselves." A monk questions, "Is the high number of remaining children thanks to Master Hyunsung's kindness?" But Hegel disagrees. Hegel, the chief of external affairs, explains, "The master himself told me that this batch of disciples is exceptionally skilled." Then he invites him, "See for yourself." The other monk is surprised by the physique of the children who will take the admission test. He comments, "By their appearance, they look like second-generation disciples." And Hegel confirms, "This proves something." He adds, "And that's why I am so confident." Hyunsung positions himself before everyone and says, "Thank you for taking time out of your schedules to attend." He announces, "It will be brief, as there are so many children, and we will begin immediately." Mujin tells Mugung, "Don't be afraid," and he tells Mugyong, "Don't be nervous." Then he turns to Muyul but decides to let it go. He turns to the group and invites them, "Have fun." A young monk runs forward to the challenge. The test is watched by the future masters of each hall, who will choose a child as a third-generation disciple. Usually, the second-generation disciples challenge the novices just to gauge their skills, but sometimes they are surprised. The boy has already exchanged over 20 blows and still seems strong. The abbot comments that the children's level is impressive, but Hyunsung replies that he hasn't seen even half of it yet. He then asks the abbot to wait to see more before judging. Hyunsung shows no anxiety, demonstrating how much he trusts those children. The bell rings, and the next disciple is called the novice Muyul. Mujin approaches his friend and asks if he remembers what he said. Muyul confirms that he should go out, relax, and have fun. begin. The boy then smiles confidently. Already positioned in the courtyard, he announces that he is ready. The challenge begins, and Muyul moves forward to land the first blow on his opponent. The older disciple observes and realizes how many forms he has already mastered. In this case, he prepares for the next phase of the fight. The older disciple decides to test Muyul's ability to adjust and apply martial arts techniques, and the boy advances upon seeing an opening. With a quick spin, the senior disciple tries to counterattack, but Muyul dodges and launches his own strike. The monk blocks the attack and wonders how a novice disciple can be so fast. In any case, he prepares a punch and advances, certain that he has him, but the boy nimbly dodges under the blow. The masters watching from the veranda react in surprise. One of them comments that the boy's movement is incredible, almost like an animal instinct, and that he is capable of reacting to these instincts with incredible flexibility and form. Then Hegel tells his disciple, Biofion, to look closely. He declares that this child will be the next disciple under his tutelage, as he could easily master all 5 Shaolin fists. The challenge ends, and Mujin reflects that Muyul's incredible flexibility is an impressive skill. He remembers how he made Muyul practice transitioning from one form to another without worrying about the flow. As a result, all movements and the flow of inner strength were programmed into muscle memory. The abbot asks Hyunsung how he managed to train the children to this level, and he replies that the abbot hasn't seen anything yet. Mujin approaches and tells Mugung, "Just don't get nervous." The boy prepares for the fight and vehemently denies that he was nervous. The masters on the veranda question if that can really be a novice disciple. The second-generation disciple stares at the opponent's size. He is surprised by the boy's height. Mugung reflects on the 2 years of intense training he went through to reach this day. The challenge begins, and he runs towards the opponent. Mugyung asks Mujin how he thinks Mugung will fare. Mujin explains that despite his strength, he lacked flexibility, but his extreme work ethic helped him overcome that. This combination of training transformed Mugung into a high-damage tank, and he hits the opponent. The older disciple is pushed back by the impact. He realizes he cannot hold his inner strength against such power. He then decides to use an energy surge to see how the fight unfolds. The older monk concentrates his strength in his fist and delivers a direct counterattack to Mugung's chest. The opponent launches a powerful punch, but the boy prepares to dodge. Surprised, the masters on the veranda observe the fight. One of them comments that the child is not only powerful, but also mixes feints into combat, being the only one to fight equally. Then Master Haidam approaches the other disciples and comments that it's not bad at all. They greet him, and the master asks if that child caught his attention. Haidam observes that the boy strives to minimize unnecessary movements, which is evidence of hard work. He states that, at that level, the young monk could very well become the standard bearer of Shaolin. Aware that everyone is watching him, Mugung prepares to show his strength, but he lets his guard down and is hit by a direct punch to the stomach. From the veranda, Master Hayadam and the disciples watch the scene in silence. A master comments that he still relies on flourishes, and Hayadam agrees that the child still needs to learn. After the fight, Mujin tells Mugung, "Don't get discouraged. Everyone makes mistakes." Then Mugyong is called for the next challenge. Mujin watches him with a serious expression on his face. Mugyong prepares for the challenge, being more dangerous than Muyul or Mugung. He attacks the opponent with an uninterrupted sequence of techniques. The older disciple questions how many techniques he has learned, as if there was nothing he didn't know. Mujin watches the fight carefully, hoping his friend continues this way. Aside from a small mistake at the beginning, the fight is going well, but a problem begins to arise. As the challenge extended, Mugyong began to get carried away by the emotion of combat. One of the masters declares that the challenge is complete, but the boy ignores the call and continues to attack the opponent. He clenches his fist and wonders about that new feeling of joy. He then completely surrenders to the pleasure of the fight. Mujin recognizes his friend's berserker rage state, and as a murderous intent overtakes him, Mujin yells for him to snap out of it. Sitting on a rooftop, a man drinks from a gourd and comments that the noise made him think the abbot was throwing a party, but he supposes it's the admission test. He observes an agile monk dodging a larger opponent and comments that the big guy would be perfect for Hidam. Then his attention turns to another monk who blocks a blow with a smile, and he expresses interest. The observer on the rooftop gets excited and declares that that monk is perfect. Decided, he leaps from the rooftop towards the courtyard, asserting that the fighter is his. In the courtyard, one of the monks is forcefully thrown to the ground. The opponent prepares to use the 18 hands of Dharma technique. From a balcony, the abbot and other masters watch the scene unfold. The blow hits the ground and causes a large collision, but a hand intercepts the attacker's arm before he can complete the movement. The man from the rooftop appears in the middle of the fight, holding the aggressor while calmly drinking. One of the monks recognizes him as Brother Hyegwan, and he confirms his identity. From the balcony, Hyedam reprimands him for daring to drink inside the temple. Hyegwan tosses the gourd back to him and asks Brother Hyedam not to play such jokes. Hyedam catches the gourd and, realizing it contained only water, continues his sermon, saying that while they appreciate hard work, there are limits that cannot be crossed. Hyegwan turns to everyone and announces, "I felt that I should be the one to take in that boy." One of the masters comments to another that the boy is truly capable, but he adds that someone needs to teach him to control his bloodlust, suggesting Hyegwan, the leader of the Death Demon Brigade. The Death Demon Brigade is the only group in Shaolin free from the vow not to kill, dedicated to protecting the populace from evil forces. The abbot agrees that it might be best, as under Hyegwan's tutelage, the young man could learn to control his impulses. Hyegwan approaches Mugyong and, patting him on the head, says, "It looks like you're one of us now." The young monk reacts to the touch. Hyegwan is amused by the reaction and comments, "I've finally found a disciple wilder than me." After choosing Mugyong as his disciple, he simply jumps back over the wall, losing interest in the rest of the test. The situation leaves everyone confused for a moment, but soon the tension calms and the tests continue. The second-generation disciple who is testing everyone wonders who the hell he will face next. Then the novice Mujin is called to present himself. Mugung analyzes the new opponent and notes that, although he doesn't seem special, he also possesses the physique of a brute force fighter. On the balcony, one of the masters tells the abbot that if he had to choose the best disciple, he would select that boy without hesitation. The abbot asks the reason for the choice, and the master explains that Mugyong could one day master all of Shaolin's techniques, but he states that Mujin is the child who could take Shaolin to the next level as the young man prepares for combat. In a flashback, Beopgang finds Mujin meditating and calls out to him. The boy explains that he was having difficulties with some techniques, so he decided to meditate for a bit, but Beopgang questions him about the techniques he had already mastered. Mujin clarifies that he was trying to solve a problem with cultivation, and the master asks if he had achieved a breakthrough on the path of emptiness. He responds, "Not yet, because I've been having trouble controlling my ki on certain occasions." Beopgang asks when this happens. The young monk reveals that it occurs when he is sleeping or when he is not breathing. Beopgang gets confused and asks, "How can that be a problem?" Mujin explains that there are several moments when one stops breathing, such as when eating or drinking, and the master understands that the concern is about how to gather chi during those times. With his arms crossed, Beopgang concludes, "Geniuses are strange. I had never thought of something like that." Then an idea sparks in his mind. He turns and asks Mujin, "Have you ever heard of the iron shirt technique?" The boy describes it as a third-rate technique used by bandits. Beopgang explains that, originally, the iron shirt was a famous foundational Shaolin technique for hardening the body, but it eventually fell out of use. He says that the technique was not useful against elite masters, as it couldn't stop their sword or fist techniques. Beopgang explains that the world believes the iron shirt technique serves to harden the skin, but that is only half the truth. The true technique, he reveals, consists of absorbing chi through the skin. Mujin reacts to the revelation, and the master says that the known version came from a disciple who had not fully mastered it. Then the young man realizes that if he masters the technique, he will be able to absorb chi at any time, even while eating or sleeping. He imagines that if he trains fluid cultivation on top of that, the effect would be multiplied. After concluding that the secret is to absorb chi and that skin hardening is a secondary effect, he starts to consider it useless, but he pauses for a moment, reconsidering. The young man has the idea of combining Shaolin's foundational technique with the modern gymnastics knowledge he had learned. With a clenched fist, he realizes that perhaps he had found a good use for it after all. To become a third-generation disciple, one needed to master 3 martial arts techniques, and Mujin had already mastered each of them up to the 10th level, but since he learned much faster than others, he quickly ran out of things to learn. He had managed to go far by filling the gaps with gymnastics knowledge, but he would need to create his own style for the future. Beopgang observes his disciple and believes that if anyone can find a way, that person is Mujin. Back to the conversation, Mujin enthusiastically asks the master to teach him the iron shirt technique. In the present, Muyul observes Mujin in the testing courtyard and asks Mugung, "What is he doing now?" Mugung replies that he has always been like this, and Muyul agrees that this is not abnormal for him. The young monk strikes himself to understand the sensation of impact and get used to the iron shirt technique. Then he concentrates to figure out how to make the absorbed ki work in his favor. favor. The opponent is surprised by the amount of ki coming from a novice. He combines the ki from cultivation and uses it in his own way. Mujin announces, "It's time to show my new martial arts collaboration." Reflecting, the abbot thinks the phrase, "taking Shaolin to the next level," is usually reserved for talking about someone else. In the distance, a master and his disciple announce that they have finally arrived at the Arhat Hall. Apologizing for wanting to see that particular test, the master hears Biopjian respond, "It was nothing." Continuing, he says that carrying him made the walk longer, but he only saw it as a more extended stroll. Calling them to approach, the elder is warned by Biopjian that he won't be able to see much from that distance. Commenting that he is too inexperienced to judge a disciple, his master states that it's better for Biopjian to watch for them and decide. From the crowd, they watch as Mujin is called to step forward. Impressed by the young man's perfect form, the old master wonders if that could be fluid cultivation. Mugung prepares for combat. With the start of the fight, Mujin rapidly advances towards his opponent. Mugung is surprised by the explosive speed and questions, "What techniques does that child know?" Mujin combines the 9 palace steps technique with the Guan Yin palm. Mugung sees the heart center fist coming his way. Preparing himself, he adjusts his body to receive the impact of the blow. Combining the 9 palace steps and the autumn wind leg to strengthen his lower body, he uses the Guan Yin palm for the center and power increase. In the end, he adds the first form of the chain link fist to strengthen his shoulders, combining the essence of all techniques. With the impact, his opponent is pushed back, revealing his hybrid martial art. Mujin then advances to deliver his second attack. Mugung looks at his own hands, as he has never felt anything like this in 10 years of blocking attacks. Preparing himself again, he sees his opponent's second blow approaching. Mugung moves to the side, dodging the punch, but the blow was a feint, and Mujin surprises him with a quick finger movement. Then he delivers a real punch, intercepted by Mugung's fist. Mugung is surprised by the strength of his opponent's grip. Unable to contain himself, Mujin unleashes a sequence of blows against him. Observing the fight, the master wonders how it's possible to create so much power with so little experience. Limiting himself to fundamental techniques of fist, palm, leg, finger, hand, and foot, his attacks remain simple. Even using basic upper and lower body techniques, he is overpowering his opponent. Then, the master realizes that instead of advancing to the next ability, there was a combination of basic techniques into new ones. Declaring that the boy is on the path to becoming a grand master, he questions if he is treading the same path as him. Turning to his disciple, he calls him by name, Biopjian. Asking for help, he requests that they take him to the center of the training field. Smiling, Mujin feels excited to finally be in the Morum. Recalling almost 2 years of training, he remembers that he could never show his true strength. Now he can finally test his full strength without worrying about the opponent in a true challenge. Feeling the tension of facing someone strong, he also experiences the joy of putting everything he learned to the test. With his senses sharpened, the world seems to slow down around him. But he notices the opponent retreating and questions, why is he moving away? Confused, Mujin turns around, trying to understand what is happening. Then, he notices the crowd parting like the Red Sea for Biopjian, who walks carrying the master. From the balcony, the abbot and Hayedam react upon seeing the newcomer. Leaping towards the courtyard, they greet Master Hyungwang, calling it an honor. Bowing in respect, all the disciples leave Mujin confused about who that man could be. Approaching, the abbot hears Master Hyungwang apologize for interrupting the test, but responds that he certainly has his reasons. Explaining himself, Master Hyungwang says that he approached to ask the child a question, leaving Mujin confused. Next, he asks the young man to remove his clothes. Although not entirely satisfied with his own physique, Mujin takes off his clothes, as he has nothing to be ashamed of. Commenting, the crowd talks about his physique, considered ideal for a martial artist. Then, the master asks if there was specific body training for the 6 fundamental Shaolin forms used. Surprised, Mujin wonders, how could he know? Considering the vast amount of Shaolin techniques, he questions why Mujin chose that method instead of learning others. Explaining himself, the young man says that because he wasn't very smart, he found the techniques that worked best for him and combined them. After all, he isn't the original Mujin from the story. Lacking confidence that he could learn advanced techniques with the same ease as Mugyung, he made his choice. He developed the hybrid technique, combining the basic forms into an effective method. Only needing to learn to move ki around his body in the right proportions, he focused on that. And to withstand the amplified ki's power, he made his body strong enough to endure it. Observing, the master comments that there was mastery of the autumn wind step and the use of extreme discipline to contain overwhelming power. Concluding, he states that, in essence, the young man created his own martial art, leaving Mujin astonished. Communicating to the abbot his desire to place Mujin Mujin as Beopgian's disciple, Master Hyungwang hears the question about taking him as a third-generation disciple. Later that night, Mujin finds himself completely confused by the recent events. Already in the Master's Hall of Arhat Hall, Mugong questions, what is so special about that guy? Reflecting, he thinks that the Master didn't seem to be in good shape, much less like a regular Shaolin practitioner. He also doesn't recall hearing that name in the Gyeongga universe when the abbot enters the room. Then, Mugong asks the abbot if he knows Master Hyungwang, but the temple leader states that he does not. In another location, the abbot tells Mujin that he called him to ask some questions and tell him things he needs to know. Then, he reveals that these things are about the venerable Hyungwang, his new master.
Beginning his account, the abbot says that at one point, he was considered the greatest warrior in the entire world. Recalling the past, he states that when his generation was only second disciples, Master Hyungwang had already achieved something remarkable at just 32 years old.
At that time, he was on the verge of surpassing the previous generation's level, and the entire temple predicted he would become the greatest in the world within 10 years. So, Mujin asks how someone like that ended up in their current state. Revealing the reason, the abbot says it all happened because of the demonic cult's attack. Reacting to the mention of the demonic cult, the young man shows surprise. Confirming, the abbot recounts that amidst the peaceful period as a second disciple, the cult attacked them. Sworn to protect all life, the Shaolin monks went to war to stop them, but terrible things can happen on the battlefield. Deemed too precious for Shaolin's next generation, Master Hyungwang was forbidden from going to war. In his place, the masters of the Gong generation and the first disciples of the Gyum generation departed for combat. Aware that the main forces were fighting elsewhere, the demonic cult sent its elite squad to Shaolin, where only the master and young disciples had remained. But at that time, the master was already one of the greatest warriors on Earth, and the elite squad could not defeat him. However, the second and third generation disciples who stayed at the temple were no match for the demonic cult. With no chance against the invaders, the young disciples were easily overwhelmed. Then, the enemies used this weakness to their advantage. During the invasion, one of the enemies attacks Master Hyungwang. Realizing the young disciples were in danger, he immediately turns around. Leaping over the temple, the master tries to reach them as quickly as possible. The enemy's onslaught results in a violent attack. Wounded, Hyungwang places himself in front of the disciples and swears the invaders will not leave that place. Throwing himself against them repeatedly, he tries to save them at all costs, and with each assault, he receives more and more fatal injuries. Lamenting, the abbot says that if they had simply died and the master had been spared, everything would be different. Then Mujin asks if these injuries are the cause of the master's current state, and the abbot confirms that they are. Then, the young man deduces that all he needs is treatment and offers to help. Surprised, the abbot questions if he truly believes he can cure him. Intervening, another master says that even the great elixir failed and asks what makes him think he could succeed. Clarifying, Mujin says that it would be impossible to fully restore the master's inner strength or his physical recovery to what it once was, but he believes that, at the very least, he could make him walk again. Mentioning the matter, Master Hyunsung comments that Mujin might have heard from the director about Brother Beopgang's knee problems. So the abbot asks if the methods used on Beopgang would work on the master, while Hyunsung confirms with a nod. The healing process for Beopgang's knees was shown, in addition to the training method that raised the disciples' level. Questioning, the abbot asks if all of that is true, and the master replies that that day's admission test proved it. Inquiring further, he asks if that training method could heal the master's body, but Mujin states that his methods alone will not be enough. Beginning to explain, he says he will need a few things, but the abbot slams his hand on the table. Declaring himself, the temple leader affirms that Shaolin will do everything necessary to help the master. All Murim practitioners seek to develop muscles and bones, leading various factions to try and find ways to control this. Everything was tried, from basic acupuncture and tonics to mystical treatments and the breaking of children's bones. Shaolin went through many trials and errors in treating Hyungwang, but no one succeeded, and the situation ended up worsening. Safely changing bones and muscles takes time and effort, but the admission test showed that Mujin's methods were effective, and since the abbot saw these results with his own eyes, he was sure that that child could cure Master Hyungwang. Affirming his decision, the abbot says that if more of the great elixir is needed, he himself will make the sacrifice. Declaring next, he states that he will cut off his own arm for it, just like the great Hyega before him. But that was far from what Mujin needed, and he asks if there are techniques in Shaolin that deal with Thunder Chi and Supreme Yang Chi. Confused, the abbot and Master Hyunsung exchange glances at the young man's question. Confirming, the temple leader says that such techniques exist, but questions the reason. Later, Mujin is invited into a room where the abbot and other masters await him. Present in the room, Hyungong acts as the head of the Hall of Discipline and Beopgang's master. And Brother Haidam, practitioner of the immovable diamond body technique, is also there. Commenting, Mujin says that he heard the details on the way and deduces that Hyungong must be Beopgang's master. Stepping forward, the two masters tell him to say what they need to do, as they will do anything to help Master Hyungwang. Then, Mujin rolls up his sleeve. Asking for something specific, he requests that they demonstrate the weakest divine thunder palm on his arm. Questioning, Hyungong asks what he means by such a strange request. Explaining, the young man says he presumed they were planning a procedure to burn a blockage in a meridian. Clarifying further, he states that he doesn't need enough thunder chi to burn, but the smallest possible flow. Agreeing to try, Hyungong approaches to touch Mujin's arm. Then, he uses a weak version of the divine thunder palm and asks how it went. Questioning again, Hyungong asks if the intention is to electrocute Master Hyungwang, while Mujin wonders if that was too much. Stating firmly, Mujin says that Master Hyungwang will not be able to withstand so much power, and that the force will need to be reduced by more than half. Questioning, Hyungong asks if that is a challenge, and confidently states that he can do it. Trying to advise caution to safely treat the master, Mujin is interrupted when Hyungong screams, "I can do it." To properly treat Master Hyungwang, physiotherapy equipment that doesn't exist in that world would be needed, as he is older and weaker than Beopgang. Starting from a simple idea, Mujin observes Hyungong demonstrate an extremely weak version of the divine thunder palm, which he approves as perfect. Seeking something specific, he wanted to recreate equipment found in any physical therapy clinic. In fact, he was recreating an electrical stimulation therapy machine. Questioning, Hyungong asks if the intention is to make the thunder chi flow into the muscles, and Mujin confirms that is correct. Explaining, he says that sending a weak thunder chi to the muscles promotes muscle activity and blood circulation, increasing contraction and growth. Then, Hyungong questions if just letting the chi flow can cause all this, and how long the treatment will take to show results. Affirming, Hyedam says he will need to examine Master Hyungwang directly, but that the results should appear in about a month. Preparing to explain, Mujin begins to detail what Master Hyedam's function will be. He says that just like Master Hyungong, it will be necessary to use the supreme yang chi, and Hyedam agrees to help if his techniques are useful. Moving forward, the master projects his palm with full force towards Mujin. With the impact, Mujin recoils and warns him that it cannot be done that way. Instructing, he asks him not to extend his arm, explaining that the technique needs to be much weaker. Demonstrating, Mujin explains that when using the supreme yang chi, one simply needs to point the palm in the general direction, just as the sun hovers in the sky. Instead of shooting out the energy, he instructs that it should just flow gently from the palm of the hand. After the adjustment, Mujin analyzes the temperature and states that it is now perfect. Explaining the analogy, he says that just as Hyungong acts as an electrical stimulation therapy machine, Hyedam's role would be different. Acting as an infrared therapy machine, Hyedam will need to maintain the technique for about half an hour. The thermal energy will warm the skin, relieve muscle fatigue, and aid circulation, as well as purify muscles and joints. As the explanation continues, Hyedam interrupts and questions, "Will that really work?" Questioned, Mujin asks him to clarify what he means, and the master asks, "Can those techniques really cure our master?" Acknowledging the achievements, he admits that the work with Beopgang and the Arhat Hall was impressive, but emphasizes that the master's case is much more serious. Then Hyedam asks, "How can we trust a technique that only this young man knows?" Understanding the distrust, Mujin knows he is an expert in his own way and that all he wants is to help. Revealing a detail, it becomes clear that Mujin, as Ganghyuk Choi, was not just a personal trainer, but a state-certified physical therapist. Delving deeper, he studied yoga, weight training, and all other exercises, even learning about diet and nutrition. All this study came about to recover from a serious injury, and the effort not only cured him, but changed his life. A memory reveals a young Ganghyuk studying for the certification. Being an expert in training, nutrition, yoga, Pilates, and rehabilitation techniques, he was the right person for the task. If anyone in that era would be able to diagnose and treat Hyungwang properly, that person was Mujin. Back in the present, he decides not to hold back and admits he was shocked by how bad the master's condition was. Stating his position, he says that he has studied treatment techniques and will do everything to improve him. "I will seek another path if you don't like my methods." Reflecting, the masters think that all known methods have failed, but this was a completely new approach. Considering the situation, they assess that if the boy's techniques can help the Grand Master, there is still a glimmer of hope. Hayadam does not discard this hope without good reason. Confirming, Hayadam asks, "Will it take about a month?" Mujin replies, "Yes." So, it is decided that they will follow the instructions for a month. But the master warns, if there is no improvement, Mujin will be punished for crimes against the elders. Calmly, the young man states, "I understand." Smiling, Mujin says that this means they need to improve the precision of the techniques, and he invites them. Let's try again. Realizing the situation, Hidam feels that perhaps he is right, and that his gestures do not seem empty. After another session, the abbot dismisses Mujin so he can prepare for the next day. Then, the abbot asks, "What did you think?" Hyungong comments, "It was difficult to release a controlled amount of weak energy." Commenting to Hayadam, he says, "This could be useful outside of the treatment. I never thought of using the techniques that way." Explaining, the abbot says that the supreme Yang Qi approach is similar to its use in martial arts to control a person's temperament. It is shown that masters of secret Yin techniques are cold, while masters of Yang and fire techniques have an impetuous personality. Shaolin martial arts use Yang Qi to combat evil, but it only works when the fire and metal keys are in harmony. Starting from the idea of treatment, Mujin did not intend to use the explosive power of Qi, but to practice a weak and constant flow to create peace. Admitting, Hayadam recognizes that, upon reaching their level, the power can get out of control, and that he never realized he could use Qi internally to temper it. He then withdraws to his quarters to continue training, and Hyungong decides to do the same. Suggesting, the abbot comments, "Once mastered, the technique could be taught to disciples, as it would be of great help to those who practice fire Qi." The next day, outside Hyungwang's pavilion, Beopgyeon greets the masters and asks, "What brings you here?" He receives the answer, "It's about our master." Explaining, Hyunshin says that they came because Mujin could be the one who would finally cure the master, even if only a little. Lying in bed, Hyungwang is surprised to hear Mujin's name. Previously, Hyunshin had already told Hyungwang and Beopgyeon everything that happened in the Arhat Hall and everything Mujin accomplished. Then, Mujin steps forward. He says, "I will examine him, and then we will begin the treatment." After a brief analysis, he realizes that the situation is even worse than he imagined. Questioning, he asks, "How long has the master been bedridden?" He notes that there are almost no calf muscles left. Asking for attention, Mujin requests, "Master, notify me if you feel any pain." He then begins to press his back. As the master endures the procedure, he continues to apply force to the massage. Questioning himself, he thinks, "Are everyone in Shaolin masochists? First Beopgang, and now the master. They don't admit feeling pain." Then, Mujin announces, "The full treatment will begin now." After warming the body with a damp towel, the treatment begins with acupressure to release tension. As a first step, he applies the four-limb extension technique, moving ankles and legs to loosen stiff muscles. The master's body seemed like a fragile ancient vessel that the slightest force could shatter. Extremely delicate control was needed to treat him, requiring intense concentration. But Mujin refused to demonstrate how difficult or exhausting it was. After an hour of total concentration, the others are surprised by his dedication, and also by his unwavering and fixed focus on the treatment. Then, a despair begins to appear in Mujin's eyes without him realizing it. In the reflection of his eye, a grandfather appears walking away hand in hand with a child. In the memory, the little boy calls out, "Grandfather!" and he promises, "I will find a cure, no matter what happens." In silence, Hyungwang remains lying in his bed. Observing Mujin, he begins to wonder what troubles the young disciple so much. Noticing carefully, he perceives the sadness stamped on his face. Finally, Mujin lets out a sigh. Standing up, he informs that he has finished his part of today's treatment, confirming that it is now the master's turn. Just as practiced the night before, the infrared and electrical stimulation therapies proceed without problems. That night, after the treatment, Mujin moves his belongings from the Arhat Hall to Hyungwang's quarters. Already settled in the new bed, he reflects on having escaped the room full of sweaty, bald men, but he ends up discovering that he will need to sleep in the same room as them to watch over Master Hyungwang. Even though he hoped to have a room all to himself, he decides that he needs to sleep. Reflecting, he thinks about how bad the master's condition is, wondering if he has suffered with pain and discomfort all these years. The situation makes him remember his grandfather and realize how much he misses him. In a memory, a young gangyuk massages his grandfather's leg. Asking if he feels better, he hears in response, "Yes, because you have a magic touch." Reassuring him, he tells his grandfather, "It doesn't hurt anymore and you can relax now." With determination, he states, "I will study hard to find out how to relieve you of pain." Smiling proudly, his grandfather encourages him, "Study hard." He says, "I can't wait to see how my grandson will turn out in the future." At another moment, Gangyuk supports his grandfather as he walks with an IV stand in the hospital. The scene changes to incense burning slowly on a funeral altar. During the funeral, the young man is comforted by his grandmother as he cries. cries. Lamenting, he says, I never managed to do anything for Grandpa beyond a few massages. Blaming himself, he starts calling himself useless. In another memory, his grandmother asks, which college will you go to? Responding, Ganghyuk says, I'm not interested in going to college. I'd rather do something else. His study materials dealt with physical training and therapy for the elderly. Then he stops in front of an armed forces recruitment poster. Smiling, he decides, maybe I'll even join the special forces. Dressed in a military uniform, Ganghyuk announces to his grandmother, I finally made it and I'll have a stable job. Holding her hands, he promises, I'll take care of you from now on, doing what Grandpa would have wanted. Alone at home, his grandmother asks on the phone, won't you come today? But she receives in response, there's training. In the middle of a jungle mission, he reaffirms to himself, I will do what Grandpa would have wanted. Then, he raises his fist, determined to take care of her no matter what. With his face covered, he maintains focus as he thinks of his grandmother. A few days before the promotion, an officer approaches and calls him Lieutenant Choi. Ganghyuk receives tragic news. Before his grandmother's memorial, he hears a colleague lament the occurrence saying, there's nothing we can do. Informing him of the protocol, the man says, we can only grant 3 days off since she wasn't your biological mother. Instructed, he must fulfill his duties and return soon because there's an ultra-secret mission ahead. Back on the mission, he pushes forward through the forest. The squad continues the ascent up the steep slope. Suddenly his foot slips and he loses his balance, resulting in a fall. In his mind, the young man sits before the figures of his grandparents. Asking his grandfather, he questions, do you feel better? Then he asks, is it too late for another massage? And he laments, I wish I had done more for them. His grandfather's hand caresses him as he says, my grandson has a magic touch, and I can never relax because of it. Tears stream down Mujin's face. Laughing softly in his sleep, he remains as the morning light illuminates the room. Entering the room, Beopgyeon finds Hyungwang observing Mujin, who murmurs, I'm not crying. Approaching, the young disciple asks the master, what should we do? Continuing to observe, Hyungwang keeps his gaze fixed on the sleeping boy. On his back, Mujin murmurs, I miss them. Asking them to leave him in peace, Hyungwang says, that is a struggle with his own heart. Understanding the situation, he recognizes that perhaps that is why the young man is so determined to treat him. Wishing him well, he asks, may Buddha be with the boy. Smiling, he tells Mujin, if you want, you can call me Grandpa instead of Master. No need for formalities. Surprised, Mujin asks as he wipes his eyes, did I hear that right? Confused by the old man's words, he questions, are you feeling ill? Finding the sudden kindness strange, he decides that he must do as told. Scratching his head, he awkwardly replies, yes, Master, Grandpa. Immediately, the other masters reprimand him, questioning, how dare you refer to the venerable master that way? But he explains, it was an order. Laughing, Hyungwang says, it's all right, to the irritation of the other two, and states, the young man has my permission. Continuing to laugh, he comments, it's been a long time since I've had so much fun. In silence, Mujin simply observes the scene. Then he asks, may I return to the treatment? The request surprised him, but it also made him more comfortable. One of the masters, saying he thinks the time has come, states that it's time to cut Mujin's hair, leaving Mujin surprised by the order. Explaining further, Hyanshin comments that, although it's not as long as an outsider's, it's already time to trim it. Commenting on the matter, Hidam says they've kept him busy and will continue the master's treatment while he goes. Mujin then rummages through a room full of documents, desperately searching for something that isn't there. Yelling in frustration, he complains about not being able to find what he needs to save himself. He needs a historical precedent, anything he can use as an excuse to protect his hair, but he finds nothing. Annoyed, he complains about the effort he put into growing his hair. In a memory, he asks a master why monks keep their hair short and hears that it symbolizes cutting ties with the secular world. Explaining, the master says that each cut serves as a reminder of the path to enlightenment, and Mujin questions if it's just a symbolic gesture. Confirming, the master explains that Bodhidharma and Buddha himself did the same, so they follow in their footsteps. Finally, he states that it's the first step to escaping the cycle of suffering and an admirable tradition. Back in the present, Mujin dismisses the tradition as too rigorous and continues to search. Collapsing, he complains that he never wanted to go to Shaolin and that he merely fell asleep reading a novel and woke up there. Suddenly, he stops and questions how on earth he ended up in that world. Trying to remember, he goes through the hospital, the gym, a live broadcast, and finally reading a Shaolin novel before sleeping. Then, the memory of the hospital stands out in his mind. Diagnosed by the doctor hair with stress-induced baldness, he was warned that he could become completely bald. Grabbing his head in despair, he reacts to the memory. Running distraught, he feels even more embarrassed, because besides the doctor's warning, he would now have to shave everything off. Recalling, he remembers the master's explanation of how cutting hair symbolizes cutting ties with the secular world. But he reflects that cutting ties with the world doesn't necessarily have to be related to hair. Smiling, he realizes he needs something no one from that era would do. Concluding, he understands that he just needs to show he has cut ties with the current world, and he runs out of the room. The next day, everything seems peaceful at the temple. Entering the room with a box in his hands, Byobjin announces the return of training. Questioning, Hyunshin asks if the scissors and razor weren't delivered, and the disciple confirms they were. Turning to Mujin, the master then asks why his hair wasn't cut. Stating calmly, Mujin says, "I cut my hair." The abbot is astonished and questions how that could be considered a haircut. Recalling the teaching, he remembers that cutting hair means cutting ties with the outside world, and he felt that this would be a better way to do it. Arguing, he says, "No one would look at this haircut and think I'm still connected to the normal world." Furthermore, he explains that he shaved the Buddha symbol on the side to honor him in his own way. Asking proudly, he questions, "Isn't the idea admirable, despite it just being a modern cut?" Remaining impassive, Hyunshin and Byobjin are not impressed by the justification. Laughing, Yongguang thinks the idea is brilliant and states that the meaning is more important than the rules. At that moment, Hyagol arrives at the door and asks for permission to enter. Entering, he immediately questions, "What strange hair is that?" He remembers that he was sent to cut it. Explaining himself, Mujin says that to cut ties with the world and honor Buddha, he decided that this hairstyle was the best, and that his grandfather also approved. Reprimanding him, Hyagol states, "Hair is a symbol of worldly desire, and cutting it represents the path to enlightenment." With complete innocence, Mujin replies, "That's exactly why I cut it." The master retorts, saying that the remaining hair symbolizes attachment to the world. Retorting, Mujin says, "From what I understand, Buddha originally didn't just cut his hair." Continuing to the astonishment of the masters, he says, "If the reason is to show that one faces the pain of others to help them, then shouldn't all body hair be shaved off?" Hearing this, Hyegol and Hyungong stare intently at their own beards. Smiling provocatively, Mujin asks, "Shouldn't everyone shave their faces too?" He then explains that the screens portray the founder, Bodhidharma, with only the top of his head shaved, keeping the rest. Faced with the founder's image, he concludes that what matters is cutting the connection with the outside world, not how it's done. Reflecting, the masters consider the matter, remembering that Bodhidharma indeed shaved only the top of his head. Thinking it over, they realize that Mujin did shave part of his hair, added the Buddha symbol, and that the cut would not be accepted in the outside world. Turning to Hyungong, Hyungwang asks for his opinion, questioning if he intends to shave his beard. Embarrassed, Hyungong gives in and says, "If his hair doesn't grow back, you can allow it." Thanking with a smile, Mujin receives permission, and since Hyungong would never cut his beard, the hairstyle is accepted. With Hyungwang's treatment concluded, training begins very early the next day. Advancing, surrounded by other disciples, Byobgang confronts Mujin and yells, "What on earth is that hair?" Answering cheerfully, Mujin says, "Master Hyungong authorized it." Byobgang is shocked. Suspicious, the Inquisitor questions if the master really allowed it. Finding it a miracle Mujin is still alive. Accepting the answer, Byobgang agrees and orders the training to begin. With the acceptance of the always rigorous Byobgang, the other disciples begin to have ideas. Following the path to enlightenment, they were still young, and many worried about what others thought or sought attention. For them, Mujin's unique hairstyle was enough to inspire a new trend. Approaching from behind, Mugung calls for Mujin. Whispering, he says, "I also need to cut my hair. How did you get away with that?" Responding, Mujin says, "I can tell you, but I don't believe you'll have the same luck." Before Hyedam, Mugung tries to argue. Hair symbolizes the will of Buddha. Declaring himself, he states, "As long as I can show I'm on the path to enlightenment, there's no need to shave my head." In silence, the masters stare at him as he awaits an answer. Calling calmly, Hyedam calls for Beomwi, who responds immediately. Grabbed by Beomwi, Mugung protests the order. Declaring firmly, Hyedam says, "I will shave his head myself." Continuing the treatment, Mujin realized that Yangguang was in such a bad state that his entire body needed attention. But it would be impossible to do everything at once, as it would overwork his body too much. So, he devised a plan very similar to an exercise routine to divide the treatment and allow each body part to rest. One day would focus on the lower leg, another on the upper leg, one for the waist and hips, and another for the shoulders and arms. arms, with Hyungong and Haidam following the same schedule. However, since Mujin was not officially the temple's physician, but rather a Shaolin disciple, he said goodbye to the master, calling him Grandpa, and said he would see him later. Wishing him a good day, Hyungwang replied while Beopgeon assured that he would take care of him. Even so, Mujin still presented himself at the Arhat Hall every day outside of treatment hours. In the Arhat Hall master's quarters, it was announced that thanks to the abbot, the additional funds requested had been granted. Questioning, Mujin asked if this meant they could get all the equipment they needed, and the master confirmed, as the administrative hall had recognized the methods. In short, the Arhat Hall master informed that all physical training would now follow Mujin's methods. Smiling, he remembered that the methods previously considered strange were finally being recognized. Realizing an important implication, Mujin understood what it meant to switch to his methods. Questioning, he asked if this meant he would have to teach everyone in the Arhat Hall. He also asked if he would need to teach everyone personally. Reassuring him, the Arhat Hall master said that he just needed to teach the second-level disciples how to use the equipment. Then, he handed him a stack of papers, and Mujin asked what all of it was for. Asking for attention, the master said that he should write down any additional equipment he needed, with detailed explanations. With a smile, Mujin could barely wait, as with the new equipment, he would be able to conduct more modern training. Questioning again, he asked if it would be possible to get equipment for another location, and if he could order more. Finally, he clarified that he would like to request equipment to help his grandpa, Master Yangguang. Worried, the master feared that the exercise would be too much for him, but Mujin explained that it was therapeutic equipment, completely different. Not understanding what it was about, he listened carefully to what Mujin had in mind for Hyungwang. The plan involved the use of Pilates, which, although seen today as an exercise for women, was originally created for the rehabilitation of injured veterans. In other words, it was perfect for Hyungwang. Agreeing, the master stated that the administrative hall would not deny the request and authorized him to proceed. Starting to write about the Pilates equipment, Mujin stopped halfway. Then he noticed a problem and wondered if such equipment could be manufactured in this era. Most Pilates equipment, like foam rollers and resistance bands, is made with materials such as rubber and plastic. Since none of that existed at that time, Mujin planned replacements using springs and metal frames wrapped in thick leather. Realizing the cost would be enormous, he threw the list to the master and left, leaving him worried about the temple's bankruptcy. 2 hours later, Mujin finally finished the meeting with Hyunsung. His friends greeted him and called him to eat, commenting that he was a bit late today. Then, Mugung asked what happened to his hair, noticing the radical change in his look. Starting to explain, Mujin remembered that Mugung was now studying with Master Hidam. One of the young monks started crying, saying he had something in his eyes, while another tried to cheer him up. Asking, Mujin questioned Muyul about how he had been doing, and the boy replied that he was fine, but there was a problem. Explaining the situation, Muyul said that every time he trained, his master just kept sighing loudly. He added that the master said he would come to visit him today, leaving Mujin not understanding the reason. Not knowing the reason, Muyul remained confused, while Hegel was shown elsewhere, sighing in frustration. Lamenting, the head of external affairs blamed himself for the choice, as he was sure he had chosen the right disciple. But Muyul was shown as a simple person who was easily distracted by things like ants. Complaining, Hegel said that for every one thing he taught, the boy forgot 2, and for every 2 things he forgot 10. Worried, Hegel thought that at that rate the 5 fists of Shaolin would be extinct in the next generation. Suddenly, Muyul spotted the master in the distance. With a radiant smile, he ran and called out to the master. Reflecting, Hegel recognized that the boy's smile was his most powerful trait, and that because of it he couldn't scold him. Then, he called out to Muyul and asked how he learned martial arts during his novice period. Answering cheerfully, the young monk said, "Mujin helped me." Surprised, Hegel heard Muyul add that he also helped Mugung and Mugyong. At that moment, the master remembered that Mujin was the disciple taken in by Hyungwang. Deciding to act, he concluded that he needed to know the secret technique that had raised the level of that hopeless child. Inviting him, Hegel called Muyul to go meet Mujin, and the disciple happily accepted. In the refectory, the master approached and introduced himself to Mujin, while the other youths were startled to see Master Hegel, and Mujin asked what brought him there. Explaining himself, he said, "I have something to discuss with you and Master Hyungwang. Please accompany me after the meal." Understanding the desire to see his grandpa, Mujin still wondered why the master also needed him as they headed to Hyungwang's quarters. Then, Muyul ran in and greeted Master Hyungwang, who called him a cheerful child. Confused, Mujin wondered why Hegel was staring at him like that, and if he had done something wrong. Receiving them, Hyungwang said, "Guests are always welcome, but what brings you here?" Explaining the reason, the master said, "I came to ask Mujin a question." Approaching, he whispered to Hyungwang about the immense difficulty in training the child, and commented that he heard Mujin had helped him before. Being honest, he stated that even the most basic of the 5 fists of Shaolin seemed to completely elude the boy, and that he needed Mujin's help. Suggesting a start, Hyungwang asked them to explain the reason for the choice and requested a demonstration from Mujin, leaving Hyegol surprised to hear him called Grandpa. Then, the master asked if he could fight with the child, and Mujin confirmed that they had fought many times as novices. Cheering him up, he told Muyul, "We're going to have fun," and called him to go outside, and the young monk enthusiastically agreed. Questioning, Hyegol asked, "What do you mean by have fun? Do you train while playing?" Already outside, the master still didn't understand what having fun truly meant. Suggesting an idea, Mugung tells Muyul to think of it as one of their usual games, and he agrees. With his arms crossed, Master Hyegol admits he doesn't understand what playing means. Silent for an instant, the 3 masters observe the situation. Then one of them comments that the meaning will soon become apparent. Turning to Muyul, Mugung asks if he is ready, receiving a confirmation. Advancing quickly through the courtyard, he leaps towards Muyul and shouts, "Let's play like the old days!" The story introduces the martial art known as the 5 Shaolin Fists, a style invented by Bodhidharma, and it was supposedly modeled after the movements of 5 animals. While other Shaolin styles focus on restriction, this one deals with the release of energy and free expression. Instead of following the path of Buddha to enlightenment, the practitioner forges their own path. Because of this, the reputation of the 5 Fists has always been on the verge of being out of control. Hyegol is the only master of the style and feels a heavy responsibility to keep it alive. Commenting, Master Hyungwang says that Hyegol rushed, and the disciple asks why. Explaining, Master Hyungwang states that Muyul is perfectly suited for the 5 Shaolin Fists. His movements are eccentric and unique, with a very creative expression. Concluding, he says that Hyegol must be worried about choosing the wrong heir, condemning the future of the style. Interrupting Mugung's attack, Mujin says, "That's enough." Asking, Mugung questions if it was fun, and Muyul enthusiastically agrees while they bump fists. Instructing, Master Hyungwang tells Hyegol to take Mujin with him, stating that the disciple's problems should be shared among the masters, and he also asks him to teach Mujin the 5 Fists, as he wants him to learn the same as Muyul. Surprised, Hyegol and Mugung react to the decision, while Muyul celebrates the idea of training together. Arguing, Hyegol says that the 5 Fists are the opposite of other Shaolin styles, but the master assures him there is no reason to worry. Turning to Mujin, he says, "Don't forget one thing." Explaining, he states that what can be seen doesn't matter, but rather the true meaning behind everything. Reacting, Mujin absorbs those words. As Master Hyungwang and his disciple withdraw, Hyegol bows and promises that he will learn as much as he can. The next day, Mujin begins training in the 5 Shaolin Fists, and he finds himself back at the training grounds. Commenting, Muyul says it's the first time they've trained alone since he got injured, and Mugung agrees. Observing the two, Hyegol wonders why Master Hyungwang made him train Mujin, questioning if he now has 2 problems instead of 1. Knowing how the master must feel, Mugung understands the confusion and frustration of suddenly receiving a second student, but he remembers that his grandfather was a great master, and certainly had a reason for the decision. In any case, Hyegol announces that he will teach both of them, and Mujin decides that he might as well learn what he can. Then, the master begins the lesson on Bodhidharma's 5 Fists, asking Mujin to observe carefully and learn. Explaining, he says they will start with the simplest and easiest, the crane fist. Calling Beofian, Hyegol asks him to come closer for a demonstration. Introducing himself as Muyul's master, Beofian tells Mujin to observe carefully, and he explains that the first step, as always, begins with qi breathing. Concentrating for an instant, Beofian prepares. Starting, he performs a sequence of fluid and graceful movements. His hands trace an arc in the air, and the demonstration ends in a final posture. Impressed, Muyul observes, while Mujin realizes that this is completely different from other Shaolin styles. Explaining, Beofian says that the style is modeled after a crane, causing the entire body to move fluidly. Observing, Mugung sees Muyul contorting in a way he hadn't seen in a long time. Slapping his own forehead, Hyegol reacts, and Mugung asks what they can do. Approaching, Mujin notices that Muyul possesses all the flexibility and body control necessary for the 5 Fists. Questioning, he asks what's wrong, and Muyul replies, "The crane fist form feels strange." Explaining further, Muyul says, "Moving that way is awkward, and perhaps even stranger to stop." Surprised, Mujin realizes that he knows the forms, but doesn't understand why he can't connect them. Then, Hyegol says that's why he looked for him, because Muyul learned the technique with him when he was still a novice. As Muyul continues to move irregularly, Mujin admits that he doesn't have an easy solution for that. Questioning himself, he begins to think why his grandfather sent him there, certain that there must be a reason. In a memory, Master Hyungwang tells Mujin that he created his own martial art style by combining basic techniques. Thanking him, Mujin expresses gratitude to the master for the demonstration. Warning him, the master says that if he wants to increase his power, his body will eventually reach a point where it can no longer withstand it. Mujin's martial art style was based on layering several basic techniques, rather than learning more advanced ones. As the strength of each technique was amplified, he worked to strengthen his body to withstand these forces. But, according to Hyungwang, at some point the body will no longer be able to handle so much power, and the methods will stop working. Agreeing, Mujin admits that his grandfather is right, and that there must be something better than relying solely on that idea. Observing him for an instant, the master suggests that he try to learn the diamond fist, sparking Mujin's curiosity. Explaining, he says that, like the small flood fist, the diamond fist is based on the Diamond Sutra, which contains keys to power control. As the master recites the third verse, Mujin wonders what all of it is about. Catching the master's attention, the disciple realizes that he seems to agree. Reinforcing, Hyungwang emphasizes the importance of discovering the true meaning behind each technique, as it is not what can be seen that matters. Remembering this, Mujin recalls that he had said before that the true meaning is the most important. Questioning himself, he begins to think what the true meaning of the crane fist could be. Realizing, he understands that the movement of the crane is exactly what the form follows. The instant he comprehends the true meaning of the crane fist, Mujin believes he has finally understood. Turning to Muyul, Mujin asks if he has ever seen a crane. With unsteady movements, Muyul replies that he has never seen one. As he asks if a crane is food, the narration explains that the style was designed for all movements to flow naturally, and it made no sense for someone so flexible to have such difficulty learning it. Questioning, Beofyan asks if Mujin is saying that the movement was too awkward and difficult for Muyul to follow. Quickly denying, Mujin explains that wasn't what he meant. Clarifying, he states that the problem is Muyul has never seen a crane, so he only tried to imitate it. Addressing Beofyan, Mujin says that the problem isn't the movement and asks him to reflect on it. Although it's said that animal movements are natural, that's only true for that specific animal's body. What they do is imitate these movements with human bodies. Learning the main forms and movements through training, Beofyan confirms that this is correct, but Mujin argues that Muyul only needs the basic structure to then discover his own movements. Questioning the idea, Beofyan hears Mujin explain that his friend cannot learn forms that imitate a crane, but what he can do is imitate the crane itself, leaving the others thoughtful. Finally understanding, Hyegol realizes why Master Hyungwang sent that boy to him. Questioning himself, Mujin wonders why he has been so fixated on forms and movements, since he doesn't follow traditional paths. Reflecting, he realizes that he was entrusted with the freest of Shaolin martial arts, the Five Fists. And he wonders when he lost sight of the true spirit of the style, fixating on a limited idea of what was taught by Bodhidharma. Agreeing, Hyegol admits he is right, and decides that they need to show Muyul what a crane is. Suggesting a solution, Beofyan proposes that they go out to find one, as they often gather nearby. The next day, the question of how they would manage to bring a crane to the temple still remained. Arriving at the training ground, Mujin apologizes for being late due to his grandfather's treatment. Stopping at the entrance of the empty courtyard, Mujin calls out for Master Hyegol. Getting no reply, he looks around and calls out for Beofyan and Muyul, wondering where everyone is. Stepping into the courtyard, he questions if there would be no training that day for some reason. Then, Mujin asks Muyul if he can guess what that is, and the boy asks what he's talking about. Peeking around a corner, he observes the scene as Muyul expresses admiration. Before them, in a small pond in the courtyard, stands a crane. Hyegol and the others admire the bird, exclaiming, "Cranes are incredible." That bird's movement was the original inspiration for creating the fighting style. Together, they demonstrate the crane fist, one of Shaolin's 5 fists. Arriving in the courtyard, Mujin asks if they are going to train, and Muyul announces his arrival. Turning around, the master and Beofyan whisper his name, leaving him confused. Then, they both shout Mujin's name with great intensity. Enthusiastically, Muyul asks him to look and says, "It's incredible." Joining them, Mujin participates in the demonstration of the crane fist for Muyul, who watches in awe. In a flashback, the masters demonstrate the crane fist alongside the bird's movements, so Muyul can learn every detail. Asking, Beofion questions, "Is Muyul understanding?" But the boy remains crouched, silently observing the crane. Muyul's crane fist proves to be very different from Haigol's and Beofion's. After observing the bird's real movements, he interprets them to suit his own body. With natural flexibility and a unique connection to animals, he moves in sync with the crane. He seemed to have escaped human movement and found true harmony with the animal. The movement embodied the very essence of the crane. Shocked, Beofion observes the scene, while Mujin and Hegol watch in silence. Being completely new, the movement still lacked refinement and intention. But this is easily corrected with the master's touch, who adjusts an arm and a leg. Then, he explains that the greatest benefit of the 5 fists is that all forms connect freely, and this will help him with his own crane fist. And he assures that, although it is slightly different from the original form, the freedom of the 5 fists will never lead him astray. Questioning, Mujin asks if he thinks he will be able to learn, and Muyul confirms, "Yes, I will." Then, he ties the sash of his own clothes. Drawing attention, he addresses Beofion and Master Haigol. Announcing, he says, "The work here is finished." He confirms, "I will not return tomorrow." Commenting, Haigol says, "It seems he found what he was looking for and is ready to return to his own master." Bowing, Mujin thanks him for everything the master taught him. Asking for something next, the master requests that Muyul accompany Mujin, and the boy readily agrees. As they walk away, Beofion asks, "Isn't it too early to send him away?" But Hegel reassures him. Explaining, he says, "That boy was never here to learn the crane fist." Realizing the situation, Mujin understands that there was nothing more to train there, as what he needed to learn wasn't the crane fist. He had already created his own style as a novice, but the barrier arose when he tried to safely master and incorporate new methods. Observing Haigol and Muyul adjusting the crane fist, he understood what he needed to do. If he started with the small deluge fist and inserted movements from the diamond fist, he could increase power with less impact on his body. It was exactly as his grandfather had said, as he wanted Mujin to find the true nature of his own style. He didn't need to master the crane fist, just understand the main movements to create the true hybrid style. He begins to wonder if there are other fists, like the dragon fist, and if they could find one. But he concludes that it would be up to Muyul's masters to discover that, and it wasn't his problem. Announcing, Hegel says, "I will withdraw." He asks Beofion to dismiss Muyul when he arrives. The most surprising thing emerges at that moment, when he realizes something important. All of that had been the result of Hyungwang's plan. Questioning himself, Hegel wonders if the master planned everything and if Mujin had already understood the lesson. That was truly admirable. A month after the treatment began, Mujin realizes that his grandfather no longer feels pain with small movements, although full recovery is still far off. And there's a big obstacle in the way, but that doesn't matter, as there's no other choice. At this point, he decides it's time to take everything seriously, as that is his only hope. As they walk, Abbot Hyunxin and Master Hedam wonder if Master Hyungwang will recover, but they notice he at least seems more lively. Recalling the past, Hedam recounts that the abbot threatened to punish Mujin if the treatment failed, but then hears that the threat only served to make him take the situation seriously. Then, the abbot states that, in any case, it's best for them to hurry. In Hyungwang's quarters, Mujin prepares to begin the treatment. As the door opens, the masters enter and ask what was so serious that he called for them. Turning to the abbot, he asks for a moment and explains that he's almost done with his grandfather's physical therapy. Observing the scene, the abbot shows an expression of surprise. Questioning, Hyungwang asks if today is the day to work on the hips, since yesterday was the legs, and Mujin confirms. Rushing towards them, the abbot questions if Master Hyungwang should be moving like that. Responding calmly, Hyungwang says, "It has become much easier, and that was just a light stretch." The answer leaves the abbot stunned. As for Master Hyungwang, that was by no means a common movement. Before, he could barely breathe, didn't move beyond his own body, and felt intense pain even when being carried. Outside the quarters, Hyedam questions if the treatment is working, and Hyeoncheon admits he never imagined seeing the master move on his own. Recalling, the abbot remembers that Mujin had said a month would be enough, and confirms that the effects are already visible. Admitting the truth, Hyedam confesses he doubted the techniques, but is surprised by their effectiveness. Informing of the decision, Hyunxin says he asked Mujin to come to them after the treatment, so they could question him personally. Aware of the situation, Mujin knew that the elder monks had immense faith in him, but he wondered if that would be enough. Understanding the moment, he realizes that the real test would begin now, and that he needed to make his grandfather walk on his own. Until then, he had focused on rehabilitation exercises and physical therapy to develop Hyungwang's core muscles. Assisting him, he helped him stand and practice walking. Much like a patient in a modern rehabilitation facility, Hyungwang was relearning to walk. His joints and tendons had recovered somewhat, but decades had passed with movements only made with the help of others. In other words, his muscles had severely atrophied, and it was time to strengthen them to support his joints. And Moojin knew that was the only way. Opening the door, he asks for permission to enter and says, "I have something to say about my grandfather's treatment." Questioning, one of the masters asks, "Is there a problem, since Hyungwang was even moving on his own?" Explaining, Moojin says, "For now it's going well, but there's a problem with the next step." The master asks him to explain. Detailing, he states that while there's recovery, the cartilage is deteriorated, something usually resolved with muscle strengthening. But in his grandfather's weakened state, the exercises needed to build muscle would put excessive pressure on his joints and worsen the situation. Questioning, one of the masters asks, "Are you raising the problem because you already have a solution in mind?" Commenting, another master says, "The treatment has been successful so far, and the achievements have been admirable." Encouraging, they ask him to share any method he knows, ensuring they will listen with an open mind. Preparing himself, Moojin proceeds to state what his grandfather truly needs. Stating clearly, he says, "The solution is to eat meat." This leaves the masters in silence. The word meat echoes in the room, while the narration explains that its necessity for building muscles is a controversial topic. Many vegetarian kinesiologists insist that a meat-free diet is sufficient, and as an expert, Ganghyuk also studied the matter. Although both proteins are made of amino acids, the central issue lies in how the body absorbs them. With advanced age, Hyungwang's digestive system cannot handle large volumes of food, requiring protein sources from meat. But this was the legendary Shaolin order, and the simple act of eating meat was unthinkable. Standing up in protest, they shout, "Eating meat in Shaolin is sacrilege, that will never happen." Holding his head in his hands, Moojin realizes the situation is worse than he imagined. Approaching, the abbot asks, "Why would someone need to eat meat to develop muscles when Moojin himself managed without it?" Recalling the past, Moojin remembers eating meat as a child and states that his situation is different. Explaining further, he says, "Although beans and mushrooms can substitute meat, they are still just substitutes." Then, he declares, "Unlike me and Beopgang, my grandfather doesn't have the luxury of youth to recover." Questioning, he asks, "Isn't the prohibition against eating meat about overcoming desire? I admit that's how I managed to stop." But he emphasizes, that practice only has meaning for those who can endure it, not when Buddhist law demands something that leads to death. Remembering his grandfather, he despairs at the thought of losing him. Shouting, he asserts, "I won't let that happen again." Doesn't that violate the Buddhist law against killing? The head of one of the masters begins to throb with fury. Then Hyungwang accuses him, "You dishonor Master Hyungwang and you dare discuss Shaolin law with me." Intervening, Abbot Hyunchin places a hand on his shoulder and asks him to calm down. Reacting to the touch, Hyungwang tries to resist. With just a touch on the shoulder, Hyunchin disperses all his inner strength. Turning, the abbot faces the other master, who agrees that Moojin presents a good argument. Questioning, he asks, "Is eating meat truly the only way for the master to get better, and why would that be the only path?" Realizing the situation, Moojin understands he cannot use modern terms, as they are unaware of the science of protein and muscle recovery. Deciding to improvise, he begins to explain that reincarnation doesn't just mean leaving the world upon death. Arguing, he says, "Everything in the world lives in cycles, and to nourish the human body, a certain amount of meat needs to be consumed. Nature dictates that all life ends and is reborn, and part of that is humans eating meat and plants." Questioning, he asks, "Is it wrong to eat something that is already dead to continue living, even if killing for pleasure is wrong?" Explaining further, he says, "In the eyes of nature, humans are just another type of animal, and that's why consuming animal meat makes one's own flesh grow." The abbot listens to the entire discourse in silence. Then, he lets out a sigh. Stating his position, he affirms, "Although your words have merit, we cannot break 1,000 years of Shaolin law without clear evidence." When Moojin tries to protest, he is interrupted by a gesture from the abbot. Continuing, he says, "This doesn't mean we can simply ignore the master who protected the order." Recalling the past, the abbot remembers one of the master's battles. Turning to Hyungwang, he requests, in the name of the Jade Buddha's palm, that he review one of Shaolin's laws. The decision surprises the other masters, but Hyunxian confirms what everyone was thinking. Proposing a change, he suggests adding an exception to Shaolin law, allowing the infirm to eat meat for treatment purposes. The proposal leaves the other masters completely shocked. Celebrating in silence, Mujin realizes he can now save his grandfather. Declaring the decision, Hyun-chaeun states that this will allow them to uphold Shaolin's law, punishing the master for eating meat. Questioning, Mujin asks what the punishment will be and offers to receive it in his stead. Then, the abbot informs him that he must perform 1 month of meditation, asking if he is ready to go through it 4 times in a row. In a low voice, he questions what 1 month of meditation would entail, but he accepts the punishment willingly, stating, "That is nothing." Around them, the masters question the abbot's decision, who acknowledges that everything is unexpected. The next day, in Hyungwang's quarters, he is informed about what was discussed in the meeting. Then, the master tells Hyun-chaeun that for Shaolin's next generation, they must place their trust in Mujin. Reflecting, Hyun-chaeun admits that maintaining tradition caused Shaolin to be bound by its customs for 1,000 years. Recounting the past, he says that he assumed the position of abbot due to Hyungwang's injuries, and that due to his own failings, he merely clung to tradition. Taking responsibility, Hyun-chaeun blames himself for Shaolin having strayed from its past glory. Responding, Hyungwang says that change is not always for the better, and he knows that. Concluding, the abbot states that it was for this reason he chose Mujin, hoping the child would bring positive change. Confirming his decision, Hyungwang says he wishes to place his trust in Mujin once more. Then, Abbot Hyun-chaeun allows him to enter the room. When Mujin enters carrying the meal, Hyungwang immediately understands what it is. The food contained meat. Recognizing it, the master identifies the rice porridge, something he had not eaten for many decades. With no alternative, Hyungwang accepts. Remembering the determination in Hyun-chaeun's eyes and what Mujin faced to convince the elders, he proceeds. And so, for the first time since taking the Shaolin vow, the master eats meat. The following week, Mujin teaches Byopgeun to take over the master's treatment. Once he can follow the treatment, Hyungwang begins to consume small portions of meat. Whether through the treatment or the diet, the master seems to be on the path to recovery. Then comes the time for Mujin to begin his meditation in the cave. Walking through the forest, he thinks he never imagined returning there, but he needs to do what must be done. As he approaches the cave, he remembers being dragged there as a novice. His original plans involved meditating for a bit, hunting and eating meat, living in survival mode for a while. But now, with Hyun-chaeun present, he invites him into the cave. Remembering the meeting, Mujin recalls when the abbot said he knew the situation was unexpected. Declaring the decision, Hyun-chaeun says he will accept the same punishment as Mujin. Surprised, the young man asks if he plans to join the meditation, and the abbot confirms. Realizing the situation, he understands that this is how the law was changed, and that he is now in a complicated position. As soon as they sit down, Hyun-chaeun begins to recite Buddhist scriptures, and Mujin feels his body unable to move. Continuing the recitation, the abbot makes the young man realize that he seems to be mixing all the sutras. In silence, Mujin simply listens. Suddenly, he realizes something is wrong as the abbot shouldn't be chanting sutras. Remembering his studies, he understands that Hyun-chaeun is mixing the sutras on purpose. Passages from different texts are recited in an unusual order. As he meditates, Mujin begins to search for a pattern in that sequence. Then, he realizes that they all belong to essential texts he studied and are linked to martial arts techniques. With that in mind, he starts paying more attention to the chants, associating each passage with a technique. And so, a visualization training begins. In his mind, he visualizes the first form as a straight punch and the sixth as a kick, but he feels that something in the sequence isn't right. For 30 minutes, he continues visualizing the training, connecting sutras and techniques. Then he starts to become restless, wanting to execute the forms seen in his mind, as merely visualizing is not enough. But he remembers he cannot get up in front of the abbot. Suddenly, Hyun-chaeun starts chanting the sutras, leaving the young man confused. Questioning himself, he tries to understand if it's intentional and what the master expects him to do. Deciding to take a risk, he prepares to stand up and practice the movements. Passing by Hyun-chaeun, Mujin notices that the abbot remains in meditation. With no reaction whatsoever, this confirms what needs to be done. Initiating the movement, he throws a straight punch, the first form of the chain-linking fist. Then he executes the 21st form from the diamond fist texts. And he finishes the combination with the autumn wind leg. With the abbot providing the rhythm, it becomes easy to synchronize the movements, but he notices that the master repeats the same passage and wonders if he made a mistake. Hyun-chaeun coughs, and Mujin understands that errors would be indicated by coughs and changes changes in tone of voice, and the chants became lower and calmer when a movement was approved. The training taught him to combine the best techniques contained in each sutra. The order and speed of the strikes were defined by the rhythm of the abbot's chants, and the secret training continued through the night. At this moment, Mujin begins to wonder why he was being trained in that manner. The abbot then reflects that they have already taken up too much of Mujin's time with the master's treatment. He thinks it would be wrong to take another month in addition to that, so he decides to compensate for all the training Mujin missed. Delivering the meditation rations and water, a monk asks them to eat. Then, Hyuncheon and Mujin enter the cave. Sitting down, Mujin realizes he was almost caught training and couldn't sense the presence of whoever had arrived. Understanding the situation, he realizes the abbot's cough was a warning and that the training was being permitted. But he can't stay still anymore and feels the need to leave. Watching him go, Hyuncheon thinks the cave is too cramped for proper training. However, Mujin doesn't leave to train, but to get protein, asking a rabbit to go find its parents. Meanwhile, Beopjin notices that the master has changed remarkably. Thanks to the meat diet and rehabilitation treatment, Hyungwang had visibly improved. His formerly weak and thin form now showed small signs of muscle development, and with this improvement, he could already move without Beopgyeon's help. Notified that the time had come, another disciple appears, and Beopgyeon withdraws to prepare lunch. Watching him leave, Hyungwang remains silent. Reflecting, he realizes that the change in his body was prevented by his own stubbornness. Then, he remembers how the abbot blamed himself for rigidly following tradition. Even though he didn't agree before, he now understands why the abbot blamed himself so much, because he realizes he wouldn't have acted differently if he were in his shoes. Admitting it to himself, he recognizes that he too was foolish. Recalling the past, he remembers saying that meaning is more important than rules. Unable to walk, he couldn't see what now becomes clear as he stands. Questioning himself, he asks why they became so fixated on ascetic practice just because it was Shaolin tradition. Remembering the past, he recalls the day the demonic faction invaded and he lost his martial arts. At that moment, everyone was worried, but young Hyungwang insisted he was fine. In reality, he was consumed by agony. At his peak, he believed he understood the 5 natures, martial arts, and scriptures. As he weakened, he couldn't accept these lessons because his ki center had been destroyed. Now, however, this becomes possible again, thanks to another person's stubbornness. Reflecting in silence, Hyungwang thinks that even if the temple disappears one day, it will remain in his heart. Then, he sits in meditation under the rain, reciting a mantra about awakening. The one who achieved the 5 natures now joins the one who became enlightened. Awakening to the highest level, he becomes completely free. Reflecting, the master thinks about the immensity of qi in the world and the human body's limitation to contain it. Walking through a temple corridor, Hyungwang suddenly stops as he feels a powerful qi. Moving at high speed, he crosses the courtyard. Recognizing the qi as Hyungwang's, he notices a different and unknown flow. Looking up towards the cliff, he questions what could have happened. Meanwhile, Hyegal and other monks arrive at the courtyard. Abbot Hyuncheon looks up, considering the situation impossible. Observing, Hyungwang sees the master's qi explode and wonders if he has achieved enlightenment and nirvana. On the cliff, Hyungwang continues his meditation. An immense energy rises towards the sky, visible to the entire temple. Noticing that the rain has stopped, the monks question the origin of the energy, but recognize the qi. Even those less skilled in sensing it understand that this energy belongs to Master Hyungwang. A benevolent and warm energy, transcending everything they knew, envelops the monks in the courtyard. Joining their hands in reverence, they all bow. Understanding what happened, they realize that Hyungwang has achieved nirvana and recite a mantra in unison. Raising his voice, Hyungwang asks, "Has my master finally achieved enlightenment?" Floating in the air, Hyungwang remains completely enveloped by the energy. Responding, he says, "I am merely allowing into my heart what I already knew in my mind." Surprised, Hyungwang reacts to the answer. Questioning, he asks, "Why, having attained nirvana, have you not yet transitioned to the state of Buddha?" Explaining, Hyungwang says, "I have unfinished business, and my nirvana was achieved thanks to Mujin." Walking towards the disciples, he asks, "Where is Mujin?" Informed, a monk says, "He has been practicing meditation with the abbot for 18 days. Interrupting, Abbot Hyuncheon states, "That is not true." The statement causes an immediate reaction among the monks and Hyungwang. Running, a messenger heads to the cave, considering the situation unpleasant. Arriving at the location, he informs the abbot and Mujin that the meditation is over and they must return. Recalling the punishment, Hyuncheon says, "There are still 10 days left until it ends." Insisting, the monk states, "I received orders to bring you back." Questioning, the abbot asks, who would have the authority to end a formal punishment? Revealing the origin, he says, the order came from Master Hyungwang. Alarmed, Mujin asks, why would the Grand Master order the meditation to be interrupted? erupted, and did something happen to my grandfather? Hyunggong asked what the master was doing, and the answer came, there's no need to shout. Next, he asked about the food, and Hyunggwang explained that he heard it was good for the body. He commented that the rules had changed thanks to the abbot and encouraged him to try it. But the master questioned, does someone who has already achieved nirvana still need to worry about that? As they walked down the hallway, Hyunggwang asked, is there any problem with what I'm eating? He continued, questioning if that's why Hyunggong forced Mujin to go into the cave just to save him. A disciple announced Mujin and the abbot's arrival, and Hyunggwang invited them in. Mujin commented in a low voice to the abbot, I feared the worst for being called so suddenly, but my worry was unnecessary. Deciding to enter, the young man advanced while the abbot wondered what the problem could be. As they approached, both Mujin and the abbot smelled something coming from inside the room. Revealing the scene, Hyunggwang showed a grand banquet and told Hyunggong, you cannot go to the state of Buddha with so much still to experience. Declaring his position, Hyunggong affirmed that he would say no more. The master thanked him for his understanding before calling Mujin. Standing at the door, Mujin was completely shocked by the scene in front of him. Confused, he asked himself, what is happening? Hyunggwang questioned. Isn't it obvious? Smiling, he declared, I am taking care of my own body. Turning to Hyunggong for explanations, Mujin heard the master affirm that he ate nothing, as it was Hyunggwang's request. Flexing his arm, Hyunggwang said, for a long time I could barely move, but now, thanks to the meat, I am much better. Stating firmly, he declared, we couldn't imprison Mujin in a cave because those who do the right thing cannot be considered guilty. Dismissing him, Hyunggwang told Mujin to train and asked the abbot to stay. The young man took the opportunity to leave, leaving Hyunchin behind. After hearing what happened, Mujin complained, grandfather reached nirvana, but he transformed into that because of his love for meat. But there was also good news, as the equipment he had requested from the grandmaster had finally arrived. Beopgian commented, now you can train as much as you want. Coming across the scene, Mujin found a room full of monks training with weightlifting equipment. Beopgian explained that they didn't know how to use some of the equipment and asked him to teach the others. Remembering the past, Mujin realized that the place was not on the same level as his old gym, but the smell of sweat and iron made him feel that he was in a true temple dedicated to the body. Two monks observed a piece of equipment, wondering how to use it and deciding to wait for Mujin. Upon arriving, Mujin asked Mugung and Muyul, where is Mugyong? Mugung responded that he must be somewhere else, while other monks approached, asking, did he escape from prison? A monk questioned, pointing to a piece of equipment. Mujin put his hand on his head, exclaiming, now that is real equipment. Correcting himself, he explained that the object in question was a rubber wheel. Asking the others, he questioned, do you want to learn how to use the equipment, or are you just going to watch? He grabbed the wheel and noted that the spokes were made of wood and iron, covered by melted natural rubber. Turning the tire, he explained, the exercise must be repeated throughout the entire training field. He informed them, the tire weighs about 250 gun, and the exercise works the entire body, teaching you how to distribute your strength. Challenging, he called Mugung to try, and the young man accepted. As Mugung started to lift the tire, Mujin warned him, using inner strength would be cheating. At that moment, Muyul approached and said, I also have a question. He explained that he didn't know what a piece of equipment was for, and invented his own exercise, asking, is it correct? Observing, Mujin saw Muyul easily jump over a bar 3 meters high. Recognizing this, he affirmed that Muyul's flexibility made him the true heir of the 5 Shaolin fists. Observing the movements, Mujin compared him to a monkey and wondered if there was a 6th fist, the monkey's. Hanging upside down, Muyul asked, is the exercise right? Mujin confirmed with a positive sign. There were also other pieces of equipment scattered around the training yard. Looking at everything, Mujin thought that place was perfect. Reflecting, he understood that focusing only on size and bodybuilding would interfere with martial arts, as he needed to maintain flexibility. Continuing his career as a trainer at Shaolin Temple, Mujin remained determined to become a master as quickly as possible, but the focus was not only on his career. He informed his grandfather that he would personally take care of the treatment using new tools. Next, he presented what was known as a leather pole. The object was a cylinder made of a solid substance, known in modern times as a foam roller. Explaining, Mujin said, it can be used on various parts of the body. He invited his grandfather to try it. As Hyunggwang reacted to using the roller, he received a warning to be careful and go slow. Clarifying, Mujin said, your muscles are stiff and it will hurt at first, but with time, they will relax. Deciding at that moment, Hyunggwang affirmed that everyone should use that tool to free themselves from the obsession of learning through suffering. Changing the subject, his grandfather asked how Mujin's training was going. Observing carefully, the master noted that qi flowed more freely through his grandson's body since the last time he saw him. Satisfied, Mujin said, all this hard training must be paying off. Silent for an instant, Yongguang continued observing. Turning, he took something that was hidden and said, "I knew this would happen." He handed Mujin a map and a message, while the young man asked, "Who is the message for?" Yongguang questioned, "Do you remember when you learned the 5 fists?" Mujin confirmed that he learned to connect and combine the movements. Then, his grandfather handed over the paper saying, "The next place will also be of great help." This left the young man suspicious. Limiting himself to that, he affirmed, "Mujin will understand when he gets there." Meanwhile, a man drank from a gourd. "Fallen on the ground," a disciple complained. "At that rate, we won't even be able to catch a fly. Please, go slower." Refusing, his master Hyeguan affirmed. That way, everyone would become lazy. Ordering firmly, the chief of the Death Demon Brigade commanded them to hurry. Mujin's name was called. Thanks to all the training, Mujin reached a reliable level of inner strength. With a message from Master Hyungwang in hand, he heads to the Death Demon Brigade. But he feels a slight nervousness, as the training would be with Hyeguan, the brigade chief. Finally arriving, he faces the immense temple gates. Inside, Hyeguan demands that the monks attack with more will and stop being cowards. Threatening them, he says, "I will feed you to the wolves." Advancing all at once, the group of disciples rushes against him. Hyeguan merely throws a bottle into the air and hits a monk in the face with his staff. Next, he strikes 2 other apprentices. Accusing him of predictable movements, one of the monks speaks as Hyeguan leaps into the air, but the tip of the staff hits another disciple's head. Seeing an opening, one of the men tries to attack his back. Then spinning, he hits 2 monks at once with his staff. Surprised, one of the disciples realizes that the attack was deflected. Defending himself, Hyeguan deals with multiple staff attacks at the same time. Laughing at the situation, he demonstrates complete control, and all the disciples are struck simultaneously. Catching the thrown bottle in the air, he holds it naturally. With everyone on the ground, he calls the monks useless. But Mugyong stands up and prepares the attack called the 18 Hands of Dharma. Advancing, he delivers a swift blow. Leaping over him, Hyeguan asks, "Did you see how easy it is to dodge?" and hits him with a powerful blow to the back. With the young man fallen, he states, Mugyong failed to control his bloodlust, but he ended up saving everyone. Approaching, a disciple announces that Mujin has arrived with a message for the master. Formally introducing himself, Mujin declares himself a 3rd-generation disciple before Master Hyeguan. Looking at him, Hyeguan takes on a confused expression. Then he starts to laugh and points at the young man's hair. Taking the message, he asks, "Did Hyungong from the Hall of Discipline allow that?" Reading the content, he comments that the note asks him to train Mujin, who should be completing a month of meditation. Questioning, Hyeguan asks, "Did the boy know what was written?" Mujin replies, "I didn't read it." Explaining next, he states, "The message authorizes me to teach in my own way." Pointing to the fallen men, Mujin asks, "Is that what you're talking about?" Hyeguan confirms. Declaring simply, the master says, "There is no better training than a real fight." Explaining, he states, "The Death Demon Brigade faces true evil, incapable of redemption. The brigade exists to combat the worst members of the demonic cult." Warning, he says, "Anyone who doesn't fight with everything will be easily defeated." He adds, "I won't go easy on Mujin." Starting to say that he would submit, Mujin is interrupted when a staff grazes past his face. Leaping towards him, Hyeguan shouts, "There's no reason to wait! Let's fight!" Questioning, the young man asks, "Is the fight now?" The new master replies, "Does the enemy usually wait?" Sliding to the side, Mujin prepares a counterattack and says, "I will do my best." Attacking, Mujin advances, but Hyeguan states, "Your strength and speed are still not enough." Noticing something, he observes that the young man used the iron shirt technique. At that moment, Mujin had used the technique to protect his face. Commenting, Hyeguan praises the innovative way he combines the movements of the diamond fist. Even being hit by kicks and punches, he admits, the connection of his movements isn't bad. But throwing sand in his face, he points out, the transition between his strikes is not smooth at all. Accusing him, Mujin calls that cheating, but Hyeguan retorts, "The enemy will do anything to win." Attacking again, the master says, "You need to descend to their level instead of complaining about cheating." Noticing again, he observes the young man's haircut, impressed that Hyungong had allowed it. As he observes the young man's persistence, Hyeguan decides that he will make Mugyong try the hairstyle when his hair grows out. Whenever Mujin leaves an opening, Hyeguan attacks him with all sorts of dirty tricks, but the boy doesn't complain. Commenting, Hyeguan says, "He's fun to fight, but warns, women don't like persistence." Even exhausted, Mujin responds, "The master must be very popular." Announcing a break, the master finally stops the fight and Mujin collapses to the ground. Lying down, Mujin asks Mugyong, "Will you keep pretending to be knocked out? I heard you greet me earlier. Standing up, Mugyong explains, I was just waiting for the master to let his guard down so I could attack. On the ground, Mujin realizes that the beating made his weaknesses clearer. Turning to Mugyong, he proposes, let's come up with a plan to play dirty too. As the disciple announces the arrival of the head of the administrative hall, Mujin says, I have a great idea. Irritated, Hegwon says, we only need funds for drinks and water for the kids. Informing him, the disciple says, he is accompanied. Mujin states, I'm going to hit that drunkard anyway. Explaining the plan, he tells Mugyong, no matter how strong the master is, he will leave an opening at some point. With a secret plan in mind, Mujin asks his companion to strike the master as soon as he advances. Mugyong doubts the plan, saying it won't work against that monster, but Mujin guarantees it will. He explains that the plan will work if the target still has some sense of gratitude. Complaining, Hyegwon comments to his disciple about all the fuss caused by a visit. Suddenly, a voice asks, is my arrival a problem? Startling the master. Approaching, the person says, I'm certainly not that unwelcome. Revealing himself, the newcomer is Master Hyungwang. He says, I'd be hurt if you'd forgotten me, Hyegwon. Shocked, Hyegwon is speechless, seeing the master there. He can barely believe Hyungwang is able to stand. Taken by impulse, the brigade master desperately runs toward him. Commenting in a low voice, a monk says, I've never seen the master act like this, not even in front of the abbot. Agreeing, Mujin affirms, that brute would never show respect to anyone. But noticing Hegwon's haste, he warns Mugyong that it's time for the secret plan. Confirming with a smile, Mujin shows he knows Hyegwon better than anyone. Recalling, he remembers that despite his dangerous appearance, Hyegwon wasn't that rude. In fact, he was more like an anxious puppy, and that's why he decided to visit him personally. Commenting, Hyungwang tells Mujin, you seem to know Hyegwon well. He used to follow me everywhere in the past. He concludes, the disciple feels he owes me his life, or at least that's what I heard. Running to get into position, Mujin moves while Hyungwang comments that he didn't do anything special for him, but the way Hyegwon runs toward the master reminds him of his own childhood. In a memory, he also ran like that toward his grandparents. Hurrying, young Hyegwon would ask if the master had recovered, just like when he ran to show a beetle to his grandfather. But, overcome by excitement, he ends up tripping on a stone. He ends up rolling on the ground. Observing the scene, his grandparents look at him, because excitement always leads to carelessness. Turning as he notices the movement of the young men, Master Hyungwang realizes the situation. And this marks the moment Mujin and Mugyong advance to attack Hyegwon. Preparing, the two execute a combined attack, using the master's own words about fighting dirty. With his guard down due to excitement, Hyegwon is surprised. Attacking at the same time, Mujin and Mugyong advance together, but the blows are blocked, making Mujin realize how strong the brigade chief is. Holding the pieces of the gourd in his hand, Hyegwon comments, the surprise wasn't bad, and I was touched. Then, he grabs Mujin and Mugyong by their heads. Then he slams their heads against the ground, saying, you need another century of training. Ordering, Hyegwon tells them to keep training while he's away, and the two agree. Beside Hyungwang, the older master asks, aren't you being too hard on the children? Squeezing the bottle, Hyegwon replies, it would be dangerous not to take them seriously. He explains, if I didn't act like this, they would relax. One must always be ready for war. Stating firmly, he declares that there should be no more regrets, leaving the master thoughtful. In a memory, a young monk runs toward Hyungwang. Announcing with enthusiasm, young Hyegwon says, I've finally become a third-generation disciple. I'm not a novice anymore. Congratulating him, Hyungwang affirms, you will become one of Shaolin's greats if you continue like this. Running determinedly, the young man moves forward, for he trained hard to achieve something, but he freezes upon encountering a dark and imposing figure. On the day the demonic cult attacked Shaolin, one of the invaders called him, you little insect. Preparing for the imminent attack, young Hyegwon concentrates. Emerging in his strongest form, Hyungwang appears and hits the enemy with a punch. That day, the master saved countless lives, and Hyegwon was the last. As a consequence, his focal point shattered, and he became impotent. It was then that he decided he would never leave those demons in peace. Swearing vengeance, he promised to make them pay personally for what they did. Thus, he took his first steps to become a death demon, and he regrets nothing. Back in the present, Master Hyungwang observes him in silence. Asking the master questions, how are you doing? And Hyegwon responds, I can bear the burden. Next, Hyungwang asks him, please look after that boy from time to time. Explaining, he says, it's still too early to teach him, as he has now surpassed any level you can comprehend, Hyegwon. Asking for a sip, Yongwang requests the drink, leaving Haegwon surprised to learn that the master drinks alcohol. Remembering the past, he recalls when he denied it was an alcoholic beverage and had to quickly hide the bottle. Questioning carefully, Haegwon asks, "Master, are you all right?" as he watches him drink directly from the gourd. Smiling, Hyungwang declares, "This water is delicious," leaving the disciple surprised. Then, Haegwon takes the bottle back and offers the honor of serving a drink to the master. Meanwhile, in the courtyard, Mujin and Mugyong train together, and in the pagoda, Hyungwang and Haegwon exchange drinks. The scene was unusual at Shaolin Temple, but it was worth seeing. But Yeonmyeong, head of the administrative hall, worries about the finances needed to feed the disciples. Observing from afar, he fears he won't be able to accept new monks next year because of the situation, placing all the blame on those two rascals. Mujin comments that Mugyong has also grown stronger, crediting it to his training since arriving. With constant combat, it would be strange if he hadn't improved, but something catches his attention. Questioning himself, he starts to wonder what is wrong with the head of the administrative hall. Quickly understanding, he realizes the situation. If the person in charge of the budget was sighing with a heavy look, that couldn't continue. As Ganghyuk, a former gym owner, he knew that feeling well. Commenting to Mugyong, Mujin says that he recognizes that look and that things must be difficult right now. Living apart from the outside world, the Shaolin Temple represents the pinnacle of martial arts. But that doesn't mean it's free from basic needs, as it depends on visitors' donations. With money from the sect clans, it was never difficult to sustain themselves. One monk tells another, "Pick up that fallen coin before it rolls away, because the administrative hall is saving every penny." Questioning, the other disciple wonders if the situation is so bad that they're worried about every coin. Commenting in a low voice, a monk asks, "Are we poor because of Mujin?" His colleague confirms, "In a way, yes." It all started when Mugyong was bullied by disciples of the sect clan, and Mujin intervened to save him. The punishment imposed on the aggressors was severe. Mutai's group had their key centers destroyed, losing the ability to learn martial arts, and the merchant protectors of Seo trade, who terrorized local residents, had their abilities taken away and their fortune returned to the people. When the Seo trade protectors closed their doors, some sect clans suspected that Shaolin had taken their money. They began to fear that the same could happen to them. So, to avoid living under constant worry, they decided to leave first. The sect clans sided with the greedy merchants and expressed discontent with Shaolin for expelling them. Since Shaolin took no action to stop them, almost half of the clans ended up leaving and discontinuing their donations. In addition, the yoga and Pilates equipment for Hyungwang and all of Mujin's modern training equipment further increased the enormous budget faced by the administrative hall. Becoming seen as a bottomless money pit, Mujin understands that he was not everyone's favorite, but he helped improve the training of all other disciples and made the master healthier. Saying that he and Beopgyeon could already manage the treatment on their own, Hyungwang asks Mujin to return to his normal routine. After the training ended, he started tending to the grounds and receiving visitors. Confirming that he finished cleaning, Mujin is called by his colleagues to receive the guests. Commenting among themselves, the other disciples say, "Now he does the same work as us." Receiving visitors, Mujin finds the task similar to greeting members at the gym. Suddenly, he hears a noise and sees an elderly woman struggling up the stairs. Telling his colleague he'd be right back, he walks away. Quickly explaining, he says, "I need to help someone." Asking if she's all right and what brought her there, he hears that she came to pray. Upon learning that her destination is the Great Hall, he offers to carry her there. Saying there's no need, the woman refuses, but he insists, showing that he has plenty of training. Carrying her on his back, he introduces himself. "I am Mujin, a child disciple." For Ganghyuk, treating all elders with respect had always been a basic human duty. Being a natural instinct, it came from having been raised by his grandparents since childhood. Having grown up with them, he always saw elders with an automatic impulse to care for them. Weighing almost nothing, the elderly woman feels light on his back. Even with bad knees and a bad back, she managed to climb all those steps. Announcing that she finished praying, the elderly woman thanks him for carrying her. Observing in silence, Mujin watches her head towards the temple exit, but he calls her again and asks, "Do you have a moment?" In Dengfeng Prefecture, Henan Province, situated in the same region as Mujin's Shaolin Temple, the area also houses a large merchant group. Complaining about the regional factions, a man says, "I wouldn't have to worry if they weren't acting up." Considering the situation, Jiguang Ryu, head of the merchant group, thinks about reinforcing the number of people in Cheongam due to the size of his group. Tired of so many reports, he slams his hand on the table and says, "I need a break." Announcing the arrival, a servant informs him, "Your mother, Madame Gahi Yeon, has returned." Upon seeing the palanquin approaching, Jiguang Ryu decides to go greet her. Running to meet his mother, he asks, "Did you visit the Shaolin Temple again?" Then, he asks her to think about her own health as she is too fragile to insist on traveling so far. Responding calmly, Ga Hyeon tells her son, "Don't worry, I am fine today." Explaining, she says that she just received a treatment at the Shaolin Temple. Describing the experience, she speaks of a new massage technique with a remarkable touch, and she adds that it was much better than the acupuncture and tonics she was already tired of. Doubting, Jigwang Ryu questions whether that would have been enough to treat her ailments, but upon closer observation, he notices that his mother's appearance is better, and even the tremors in her leg have subsided. Impressed by the young monk's skill, he decides that he will go to the temple the next day to meet him. In his room, Mujin remains thoughtful, for even though he had helped the elderly woman, he felt uneasy. It wasn't because she reminded him of his grandmother, nor because she was surprisingly rich. The problem was in the palanquin's inscription, which read, "Celestial Flow Merchant Group." Recognizing the name, he remembers that it was one of the 5 great merchant groups in the universe of The Fall of the Sinister Faction. And in that story, they were not on the friendly side, but part of the enemy faction. Mujin introduces himself, saying he is a 3rd-generation disciple, but asks to be called just Mujin. Thanking him for the visit, Ga Hyeon says he is adorable. Questioning, Jigwang Ryu asks if he was the one who treated his mother. The young man replies, "It was nothing." Smiling, the lady says she is happy to see him again, and that she returned to pray and receive another massage. Jokingly, she comments that she would introduce him to her granddaughter if he weren't a monk, but Mujin invites her to bring her next time. Observing the scene, Jigwang Ryu notes that even his own grandchildren aren't as affectionate, while his mother says that she will really bring her. Happy, the young man rejoices at seeing the lady smile. Turning his gaze, Mujin stares at Jigwang Ryu, recognizing him as the head of the merchant group. Perceiving the current situation, he understands that for now, they are just a merchant group. But he remembers that in the novel, the Celestial Flow Group was involved in crimes such as drug dealing and human trafficking. And even though they weren't official allies of the villain, they clearly maintained some kind of agreement. Concluding, he decides that they haven't been corrupted yet, and that he can discover the connection by getting closer. Noticing his gaze, Jigwang Ryu asks, "Is there something on my face?" Awkwardly, the young monk quickly denies it. Commenting next, he says the man must spend a lot of time sitting, seeing him massage his own back. Surprised, Jigwang Ryu asks how he knew, confirming that he reads a lot while sitting and hasn't exercised in a while. Explaining, Mujin says that slightly curved hips and back are typical of someone who works in an office. Suggesting, he comments that since he is there, he could take the opportunity to receive treatment along with his mother. Agreeing, Jigwang Ryu accepts, curious to see what the boy is capable of. Heading together, they proceed to Hyungwang's residence. Surprised, the master and Beopjian notice that there are guests at that hour. Arriving at the location, Mujin appears with Ga Hyeon and her son, explaining that they came for a treatment. Questioning, Beopjian asks if it's okay to treat everyone together, and Hyungwang agrees. Deciding on the division, Mujin says that he will treat the master and the lady, while Beopjian will take care of the gentleman. Showing some tools, Beopjian explains that the treatment consists of a 4-limb extension technique. Informing him of the plan, Mujin tells the master that today's treatment will be on the muscle-strengthening device. Positioning himself, Hyungwang places one foot on the back pedal, grips the front handle, and pushes backward. Commenting on the sensation, he says that even though it's his first time on the device, he can already feel the effect. Guiding him, Mujin asks him to let him know when his legs get tired so they can move to the next position. Turning next, he invites the lady to try the spinal correction chair. Helping her to sit, he asks her to position herself in the hollow area and lean back. Commenting with slight discomfort, the lady says, "Even lying down seems to hurt now." While Hyungwang exercises, Mujin asks how she feels, and the lady replies that she trusts he would never make her do anything dangerous. Revealing the situation, Hyungwang says that he has been receiving treatment from Mujin for some time, which leads the lady to question the necessity, as he seems so healthy. Explaining calmly, the master says that he was in a much worse condition before, leading the lady to conclude that Mujin has a golden touch. Amidst laughter and light conversations, the place begins to resemble more of a rehabilitation center for the elderly than a temple. Curious, Beopjian asks Jigwang Ryu about the 4-limb extension technique, and the man replies, "It was very good." Detailing the experience, he explains that it was quite painful at first, but the pain lessened over time, leaving only a feeling of relaxation. Grateful, the head of the merchant group thanks him for the treatment, while Beopjian shows relief at having been able to help. Admitting the truth, Beopjian says that it was the first time he had used Mujin's technique on another person, surprising Jigwang Ryu. Thoughtfully, the merchant remembers having heard the name Hyungwang somewhere. Observing the scene, he notices Beopjian commenting that his master still has some muscles that need to be loosened. Turning to Mujin, Beopjian asks, "Do you want to try the heat and stimulation treatment?" Refusing with a gesture, Hyungwang says he is better and demonstrates that he can perform the treatment himself. Surprised, Mujin realizes that he already has enough inner strength to generate fire and thunder chi in each hand. Impressed, Ga Hee-yeon comments that she now understands that Hyungwang is a man of great talent. Approaching, Jigwang Ryu asks Beopgyeon, "Is that man's name really Hyungwang?" Noticing the signs, he understands that those are not techniques any Murim practitioner could execute, and he begins to remember who he is. 30 years ago, Hyungwang was the man who defeated the demonic cult that invaded the temple, known as the greatest under the heavens. Shocked, Jigwang Ryu can barely believe that the man in front of him is the legendary divine monk of Shaolin. Recalling the rumors, he remembers whispers saying that the master had been incapacitated after the demonic cult's attack. Observing the recovery, he concludes that the four-limb extension technique was able to cure him. Reflecting in silence, Jigwang Ryu begins to think that this encounter might have been destined to happen. The treatment he and his mother received was, without a doubt, truly effective, coming from the legendary master who had once lost his powers. And that four-limb extension technique had been created by the young Mujin. There was no longer any doubt. That boy was truly special. As evening falls, Ga Hee-yeon thanks him again for the day, and Mujin replies, "It was a pleasure." Hyungwang applies the treatment to the lady's arm, and she comments, "The sensation is pleasant." Later that night, Mujin says goodbye to Jigwang Ryu, but the man asks for a moment before leaving. He says that he will return early the next morning to talk and asks to be taken to the administrative hall. Mujin agrees to accompany him, but asks what the reason for the visit is. Jigwang Ryu replies, "I will explain tomorrow, as the matter also involves you." The young man agrees to inform those responsible, and is left wondering what he might be planning. The next morning, Mujin escorts the head of the merchant group to Shaolin's administrative hall. Hyunmyoung, the head of the hall, asks the visitor to repeat what he just said. Jigwang Ryu proposes that the Celestial Flow Merchant Group and Monk Mujin open a clinic together. As payment for his mother's treatment, Jigwang Ryu offers 100 liang of gold, enough to secure a year's worth of food for the temple. Lamenting not being able to give more at the moment, he admits that the treatment was more promising than those performed by the most famous doctors. Curious, Yeonmyoung asks him to better explain the idea of opening a clinic with Mujin. Explaining with conviction, he comments that Mujin's treatment techniques do not exist anywhere else on the continent. Believing in its potential, he states that this could help many patients who cannot be cured by traditional treatments. Refusing immediately, Hyunmyoung says that Shaolin does not profit from the work of its disciples. Concluding his thought, he states that the clinic would end up being opened only to benefit the rich. Realizing his plan was discovered, the merchant reacts by saying that is not his only objective. As a member of one of the 5 great merchant groups, he reminds them that he has many connections. Reflecting on this, Jigwang Ryu realized that using Mujin's treatment on the elderly and wealthy would be highly profitable. Deciding cautiously, he concludes that he first needs to build a close relationship with Shaolin. Proposing an agreement, he suggests that half of the profits be allocated to Shaolin to help those in need. However, Hyunmyoung argues that building trust requires a lot of time and sincerity, and that a single misunderstanding can destroy it. Finding all of it bothersome, the head of the administrative hall shows impatience. Questioning silently, he wonders why they would refuse since they need the money. Spotting an opportunity, Mujin realizes he can use his experience as a gym owner in that situation. Asking for permission, he requests to speak. Speaking cautiously, he states that he believes he has an idea. Recalling the central point, he comments that the problem would be treating only the rich, something the master confirms. He then suggests treating everyone without distinction between rich and poor. Confused, the two men stare at him and ask what he means by that. Explaining logically, he states that if the same treatment fee is set, the poor will not be able to pay, which would decrease demand. Therefore, he proposes they create 2 facilities instead of just one. One would be open to everyone, free of charge, while the other would be reserved for the rich. Beginning to question the idea, Jigwang Ryu tries to interrupt, but Mujin asks him to continue. Anticipating the reaction, he states that the rich will complain about being the only ones to pay. The free facility would use the basic 4-limb extension technique with a daily schedule. The paid facility, on the other hand, would add extra treatments and techniques, including heat and thunder ki treatment. That was the business model of large academies, with a basic price and personal training for an additional fee. Impressed by the idea, Jigwang Ryu questions how a child could have thought of something like that. Explaining calmly, Mujin says that the rich love luxury and that vanity is involved, making the merchant understand immediately. Concluding his reasoning, Jigwang Ryu states that the free facility would be for groups and the paid one by reservation only, attracting the rich through pride. Becoming furious with the proposal, Hyunmyoung reacts with indignation. He then yells at Mujin, questioning how a Shaolin disciple dares to speak of worldly vanity for profit. Directly, the young man asks what the master is afraid of, making him even more irritated. Recalling the recent past, Mujin says that before, he feared Shaolin would seem greedy by taking money from the rich to help the poor. Now that he suggests a way to treat the poor, the master opposes taking advantage of the rich, making Mujin question Shaolin's ability to accept criticism. Growing even more annoyed, Hyunmyoung asks how he dares to speak that way about Shaolin. Intervening in the discussion, Jigwang Ryu asks if profiting from the rich would really harm Shaolin's prestige. Admitting his concern, the hall chief says he doesn't want people to criticize the temple, but Mujin states that he would be more bothered by not helping the needy just to avoid criticism. Continuing, he says it doesn't matter if people don't understand, because the truth is what counts. The truth is that Shaolin is always working to help the people, and what matters is the meaning behind the law. Staring at him in silence, Hyunmyoung sees the image of Master Yeonggwang reflected in him. Standing up slowly, Hyunmyoung agrees that Mujin might be right, but he warns that the decision will require the abbot's permission and that the matter still needs to be discussed internally. Grateful for the decision, Jigwang Ryu celebrates, realizing the plan worked. Complaining in a low voice, Mujin says he barely managed to get the idea approved and doesn't understand what the head monks are thinking. In any case, he managed to get closer to the Celestial Flow merchant group. Now he can use this business as an excuse to investigate the group further and discover who the villain is. That night, Hyunmyoung talks with Hyunxian about everything that happened, and he receives an enthusiastic approval in response. Believing firmly, the abbot says that Mujin is the child capable of guiding Shaolin in the right direction. Suggesting recognition, Master Hyungwang proposes that they reward the young man for everything he has done. Curious, Hyunxian asks what kind of reward would be suitable, and the master replies that an elixir would be good. He also says that, to be a true reward, it could only be that. Shocked by the suggestion, the abbot reacts in silence. Disbelieving, he cannot accept that the master is serious. The next day, during afternoon training, Mujin asks his master what brought him there and what he is holding. Handing something to him, Yeonggwang says that it is a gift for everything he has done, stating that he got it for him. Inside is the elixir of Shaolin, the elixir of life, leaving Mujin completely shocked. Elixir pearls are a type of traditional medicine found in historical dramas and martial arts novels. These special ingredients are known for storing large amounts of qi, and they are famous for the significant increase in inner power when consumed, with the Shaolin elixir pearl being considered the best and rarest of all. Master Hyungwang then presents the reward inside a small box. He tells Hyejung that it is a prize for his incredible achievement. Hyungwang recalls that he actually wanted the grand elixir pearl for his disciple, but the abbot recommended the small one for now. The master scoffs at the insignificant item, but states that it is still a reason to celebrate, while Hyejung decides to ignore the comment. Hyejung asks if they don't consider him ready for the bigger pearl, but Hyungwang simply says, "You will understand when you take this one." Then, the master encourages him to take it right now, assuring him that he will help with the process. Hyejung accepts enthusiastically, as it's not every day one receives such a rare offer. They arrive at a pavilion hidden in the middle of the forest, a good spot with plenty of qi flowing naturally. Sitting down, the master explains that absorbing the qi from an elixir will be different and will work in the opposite direction of the usual method. The normal technique involves slowly breathing in qi, but with an elixir, the energy flows directly into the stomach. Hyejung concludes that instead of focusing on breathing, he needs to focus on the qi of the elixir itself, and his master confirms. But Hyungwang warns him that if he is greedy and tries to retain all the energy, he will fall into a state known as the fiery demon. Hyejung states that he understands the importance of the task, as he has never seen his master so serious. Then he prepares himself and swallows the pearl in one gulp. Meditating, he feels the power of the small elixir pearl flowing within him. He wonders how to absorb that energy and decides it's time to test his focus technique. Hyejung then activates the Great Buddha focus technique. The qi slides down his throat, reaches his stomach, and spreads throughout his body through his blood vessels. He finally understands why the heroes of martial arts novels seek these items so desperately, and he reminds himself that he needs to absorb as much as he can as per his grandfather's instruction. 30 minutes later, he starts to sweat and struggle with the process. Hyejong realizes that this is why he was warned not to be greedy, as much of the pearl's qi is escaping. The amount of qi to absorb is simply too great, and he is unable to contain it. He remembers his master's words and realizes that the qi he cannot absorb escapes with his breath, repeating the cycle. Hyejong continues the breathing process, inhaling and exhaling. He then opens his eyes, estimating that he managed to absorb perhaps a third of the energy. But he concludes that this is more than enough, and that he doesn't need to worry about what was lost. Mujin tells his master that he tried not to be greedy, but it seems he failed. Yongguang confirms that the small elixir pearl possesses immense power. He then reveals that Mujin actually absorbed all the pearl's power, but this miracle was only possible because of Hyungwang's direct involvement, as the young man coughs. The master took the qi that was escaping from his disciple and combined it with the natural qi around, so it wouldn't be lost. And without Mujin realizing it, he returned the energy little by little for him to breathe in again. It was an almost impossible feat, but Hyungguang couldn't let his disciple's effort go to waste. Mujin feels his body trembling and asks how such a small pearl could contain so much qi, stating that he can barely stand still. Hyungguang responds that it was all part of the plan and asks him to follow him. He asks how they will resolve this, and his master reassures him, saying, "There is an ideal practice for your current state. The best way to calm the immense energy flowing through him is with an unwavering mind." So, he takes him to a waterfall to begin the unwavering mind technique. The reason Hyungwang brought him there was to help him control the qi and train his mind to calm down. Normally, those who practice supreme yang qi, like Hyedam and his disciples, follow this training. It is a training method to learn to control the excitable and impetuous nature of practitioners of this type of qi. One example is Buddhist chanting while handling a prayer rosary, and another is focusing on recalling happy memories. In other words, the unwavering mind consists of keeping both mind and body calm. Hyungguang then tells Mujin that after meditating for hours, now is the time to test the movements, and Mujin unleashes the chain-linking fist. After hours of visualizing the forms under the waterfall, Mujin calmed his mind and controlled the flow of his energy. The resulting power was enough to split the waterfall in two, and that is how Mujin became even stronger. He then looks at Hyungguang. The boy's growth made the old man happy and brought him even more enlightenment. In gratitude, the two shared a long look and bowed to each other. They spent 2 days like this, and then the master asks, "Are you ready?" Before the abbot and other monks, it is said that Mujin is not yet old enough to enter the world, so the 5 must take care of him. Elsewhere, Jigwang Ryu reports that most of the preparations are complete. They just need to go to Dongfeng Prefecture to verify. The abbot thanks Mujin for everything he has done, and Hyungguang instructs him, "Go, work hard, and return." Mujin thanks him for the trust placed in him and promises that Shaolin and the Celestial Flow Merchant Group will work together. He then states that they will help as many people as they can to overcome the crisis they are facing. Hyungguang agrees with his disciple's words. Then the master wishes him a good journey, and Mujin thanks him as he moves away from the temple. In a dark room, a woman sitting at a table is asked if they can go now. Then, a voice calls her by the name Lady Xiaohua.